Chapter 1384. Half a month later, Yi Xian finally walked out of the room. Outside the room, Yi Xian looked up at the sky. He closed his eyes and spread his arms. His body became illusory. At this moment, his body seemed to be one with heaven and earth. Dao body. After half a month, under Yi Jiming's guidance, he finally succeeded in cultivating this Dao body. The reason why it was so fast was that his physical body had a strong foundation. Before his physical body reached Dao body, his physical body was already top-notch. Now that his physical body had become a Taoist body, even the gourd deity could not melt him. It could be said that among the Dao defense realm, only White Robe and Zhen Wu could pose a threat to his physical body. However, if they wanted to kill him, it would not be as easy as before. Now, he could completely rely on his invincible physical body to fight against Zhen Wu and White Robe. In short, he was more tanned and harder to die. In addition, this Dao scripture could also be improved. His physical body could reach Dao defense realm, Dao attainment realm, within the scope of Dao scripture martial arts. There was no upper limit for Dao scripture body tempering. This was a Dao scripture body tempering that could continue to grow. At this moment, Guanyin appeared beside Yi Xian. She looked at Yi Xian and asked, "You broke through?" Yi Xian nodded. Guanyin smiled sweetly. "Congratulations." The improvement of Yi Xian's strength was beneficial to the entire fifth dimension. Yi Xian looked at Guanyin. "How is the fifth dimension now?" Guanyin's lips curled up. "We have more than 3,000 spirits. These spirits are now living in our fifth dimension for a long time." Yi Xian nodded. "You must give them preferential treatment." The help these 3,000 spirits could provide to the fifth dimension was immeasurable. Guanyin nodded. "Very preferential treatment. Also, Xiao Linger has become the boss of these spirits." Yi Xian blinked. "I became the boss." Ever since the recruitment of the spirits of heaven and earth began, Yi Xian had given Xiao Linger full authority to entertain these spirits. This was because it was easier for Xiao Linger to gain the trust of these spirits. Normally, heaven and earth spirits would not believe in humans. Little did he expect that Xiao Linger would become the boss. Guanyin laughed and said, "Yes, she is already the boss of all the spirits. Moreover, she also created a sect called the Spirit Sect. Inside are all the spirits of heaven and earth, and she is the sect master." Yi Xian hurriedly said, "Come, let's go take a look at the Spirit Sect." Guanyin smiled. "All right." Very quickly, the two of them arrived at the Spirit Sect. The Spirit Sect was built in the depths of a large mountain. As soon as the two of them entered the mountain, Yi Xian sensed an incomparably pure spiritual energy. The spiritual qi here was too rich. It was in no way inferior to the Dao tomb. Yi Xian was a little surprised. At this time, Guanyin suddenly said, "Because there are many spirits of heaven and earth here, I placed 6 top-grade dragon veins here. In addition to the spirits of heaven and earth themselves, the spiritual qi here is at least 10 times richer than in other places." She paused for a moment, then continued, "There is no other way. When these spirits come to our fifth dimension, we have to give them the best conditions. Moreover, it is very worth it. After these spirits come, they will help us restore the imbalance of the spiritual qi in certain places." Yi Xian laughed. "These spirits of heaven and earth are generally very kind. If we treat them sincerely, they will also follow us sincerely." Guanyin nodded. She had come into contact with these spirits of heaven and earth before. They were indeed kind and easy to get along with. Not long after, the two of them arrived at the Spirit Sect. It had to be said that the Spirit Sect was built quite well. There were more than 10 halls, and they were all very large. At first glance, it looked very imposing. At this time, a ball of white light suddenly appeared in front of Yi Xian and Guanyin. In the white light, there was a pair of eyes. When she saw Yi Xian, her eyes immediately became alert. Vigilance immediately appeared in her eyes. But when she saw Guanyin, the vigilance in her eyes turned into joy. The ball of white light floated in front of Guanyin and said in a crisp voice, "Sister Guanyin." Guanyin smiled slightly. "It's Xiaoxing." The white light hurriedly nodded. "It's me." Guanyin laughed. "Where is your sect master?" Xiaoxing turned her head to take a look, then said, "Sect master is in a meeting." Meeting. Hearing this, Yixian's expression became a little strange. This Xiaoling is in a meeting? Guanyin blinked. Can you take us to have a look? Xiaoxing nodded. Yes. As she spoke, she seemed to have thought of something, and suddenly looked at Yixian. Guanyin laughed. He is your sect master's elder brother. Elder brother? Xiaoxing blinked. Elder brother? Yixian nodded and said with a smile. Yes. Xiaoxing glanced at Yixian, her eyes full of curiosity. Sect master said that you are very powerful. Are you really that powerful? Yixian laughed, and then spread out his palm. Dozens of wisps of purple gas floated toward Xiaoxing. When she saw the purple gas, Xiaoxing suddenly became excited. She looked at Yixian and said with a trembling voice, Is it for me? Yixian nodded and said with a smile, Yes. Xiaoxing hurriedly said, Oh, thank you, thank you. Very excited, very excited. The purple gas was really useful to them. If the purple gas was a little purer, it would be enough to change the fate of these spirits. After a while, Xiaoxing brought Yixian and Guanyin to the main hall of the spirit palace. At this time, there were more than 3,000 spirits gathered on the bluestone square below the main hall. When he saw more than 3,000 spirits, Yixian was a little shocked. When these spirits gathered together, it was really too shocking. He had never seen so many spirits. At this moment, the spiritual energy on the bluestone square was so rich that even the 33 levels of doubting could not compare to it. In the past, these spirits were equivalent to rogue cultivators, and they lived in fear. Because of their own reasons, many humans had always wanted to obtain them. Therefore, most of the spirits of heaven and earth hid in the mountains and forests. Now, Yixian gathered them together. Not only did he protect them, but he also gave them the best resources and status. Here, humans were very respectful when they saw them. No one dared to be disrespectful to them. Moreover, everyone's respect for them came from the bottom of their hearts, because they had indeed helped the fifth dimension a lot. They didn't do anything. They were just helping. In the distance, Xiaoling was wearing a white dress and holding a staff in her hand. She looked at the spirits below with a calm expression, very much like a big sister. Below, all the spirits were looking at Xiaoling. They were also very convinced of Xiaoling. This was because Xiaoling was the highest ranked among them. In addition, Xiaoling's status in the fifth dimension was unparalleled. Who didn't know that Yixian treated her like a younger sister? Most importantly, Xiaoling had a good relationship with the little white fellow. Who was that little guy? The spirit ancestor. The spirit ancestor of heaven and earth. In the distance, Xiaoling suddenly pressed her hand down lightly, and the surroundings instantly fell silent. Very imposing. Xiaoling glanced at the spirits here and said, All of you have to get even more companions. Here there is food to eat, a place to live, and there are people to protect everyone. Anyone who finds a companion, I will give them 100 strands of violet energy, plus 30 fortune divine crystals. With that, she waved her right hand, and a large pile of fortune divine crystals appeared in front of her. There were more than 1,000 fortune divine crystals. She got it from Yixian. She'd asked for it. Yixian had given her 10,000 fortune divine crystals, and he hadn't asked her why she wanted them. In any case, he'd given them to her if she wanted them. However, Yixian hadn't expected that Xiaoling would use them for this. The eyes of many spirits here instantly lit up when they saw the fortune divine crystals. Fortune divine crystals. They were very useful to them as well, because they contained extremely pure energy within them, and it would be extremely beneficial to them if they absorbed it. Little Linger continued. Call a little friend over 30 creation divine crystals. If you call 2 over 70. If you call 3 over 150. If you call more than 5 over, directly give 300 creation divine crystals and 300 wisps of purple aura. As for the companions all of you call over, they will get fortune divine crystals and violet energy as well. All the spirits below instantly became excited when they heard this. 300 fortune divine crystals and 300 strands of violet energy. This was a good thing. Many of them were dumbfounded. They were actually very poor when they were independent cultivators. so they'd never even seen fortune divine crystals and violet energy before this. Meanwhile, Xiaolinger distributed the fortune divine crystals and violet energy to some of the spirits. All of them were from the companions she called over earlier. Some of the spirits here were extremely envious when they saw those spirits obtain the fortune divine crystals and violet energy. Meanwhile, Xiaolinger continued, "Everyone has a chance. So long as you call your companions over, you'll have it. Now go call them over. Don't worry, I'll send people to protect all of you." It didn't take long for the spirits here to shoot into the sky. They were going to look for companions. Even if humans did find companions, those spirits would be extremely vigilant because they didn't trust humans at all. However, it wouldn't be a problem if the spirits went to look for other spirits. The relationship between spirits wasn't as complicated as it was for humans. So, making the spirits look for other spirits could attract even more spirits over. After the spirits dispersed, Guan Yin, who stood by Yi Xian's side, shook his head and smiled. "What a formidable little fellow." Yi Xian nodded and smiled. "He really is formidable." As he spoke, he glanced at the direction that the spirits had left in the sky. Guan Yin said, "Don't worry, someone will protect them from the shadows." Yi Xian nodded. "Take good care of them. Since they trust us, then we have to live up to their trust." Guan Yin nodded. "Of course." Meanwhile, Xiaolinger ran over to Yi Xian and Guan Yin, and Xiaolinger grinned. "Big sister Guan Yin, big brother." Yi Xian lightly rubbed Xiaolinger's little head and smiled. "Was it fun?" Xiaolinger hurriedly said, "I wasn't playing. I was doing serious business." Yi Xian laughed. "Right. Let's do serious business." Xiaolinger blinked. "Big brother, I still want the fortune divine crystals. You know, the development of our spirit sect requires a lot of money." Yi Xian. At the side, Guan Yin shook her head and smiled. Yi Xian took out a storage ring and handed it to Xiaolinger. "For you." Xiaolinger giggled and hurriedly took the storage ring. Yi Xian said seriously, "There are many places in the fifth dimension that require the help of these spirits. When the time comes, you have to cooperate with big sister Guan Yin, understand?" He knew that these spirits were very obedient to Xiaolinger. Xiaolinger hurriedly nodded. "Of course." Yi Xian was about to speak, but at this time, the space in front of him trembled slightly. Yi Xian frowned. Guan Yin looked at Yi Xian. "What is it?" Yi Xian said in a low voice, "I want to return to the dual realm abyss." After saying this, he directly turned around and disappeared. At the scene, Guan Yin frowned deeply. Something happened. Chapter 1385. Two Realms Abyss, Heavenly King Hall. Qi Yaoyao was already waiting for Yi Xian the moment he entered the hall. Yi Xian said solemnly, "Did something happen?" She nodded. "It's not a bad thing, but it's not good either." Yi Xian looked at her. "What do you mean?" Qing Yaoyao said in a low voice. "A black vortex has appeared in the two worlds abyss. We can sense an extremely pure spiritual aura within it. Our initial estimate is that there are at least 10 supreme-grade spirit veins inside. And there might even be the legendary supreme-grade spirit veins." Yi Xian frowned. "Black vortex? How did it appear?" She shook her head. "We explored it. Do you know how deep this heaven realm abyss is?" Yi Xian shook his head. She said, "The interior of this heaven realm abyss is bottomless. Even now we can't explore it completely." Yi Xian was puzzled. "Even the Dao Tomb and Doubting can't do it?" She smiled. "Do you know the origin of Heaven Realm Abyss?" Yi Xian shook his head. He actually didn't know much about Heaven Realm Abyss. She said softly, "Actually, we don't know either." Yi Xian was stunned. "You don't know either?" Qian Yaoyao nodded. "This place has existed longer than us and the Dao Court. We've been exploring this Heaven Realm Abyss all these years, but we still haven't fully explored it." Yi Xian frowned. "So mysterious?" She smiled. "It's not just mysterious. There's a flow of air in the depths of this heaven realm abyss. It's extremely strange, and even Dao-controlling experts can't resist it. The deeper we go, the stronger the flow. In the past 10 years, we in Doubting have explored heaven realm abyss, and more than 60 Dao-controlling experts have died." Yi Xian said softly. "In other words, none of you have been to the bottom of this heaven realm abyss?" She nodded. According to my guess, the heaven realm abyss we've explored may not even be a third of it. 1/3. Yi Xian was visibly moved. If less than a third of it had been excavated, then this heaven realm abyss would be extraordinarily terrifying. How many spirit veins were there in the depths of the heaven realm abyss? Just thinking about it made one's blood boil. Meanwhile, Qing Yaoyao suddenly said, "Don't think too much about it. The deepest place we can probe is the dark realm. We can't even enter the dark realm right now." This time, the black vortex appeared at the edge of the dark realm. "This time, I asked you to come here because I want you to make a trip there. Is there any problem?" Yi Xian blinked. "Me?" Ting Yaoyao nodded. Yi Xian was a little puzzled. "You and Rahu are stronger. Why don't you go?" Qian Yaoyao smiled and said, "If we go, who is going to block the doubting for you? Do you think the doubting will just stand and watch when such a black vortex suddenly appears? They would definitely intervene. As for us, we have to stop White Robe and the others. No matter how I think about it, you're the most suitable." Yi Xian grinned. "Are there any benefits?" Qian Yaoyao walked in front of Yi Xian and looked at Yi Xian. "Are you afraid you won't be able to reap any benefits if you go there?" Yi Xian said seriously, "Actually, I'm just asking. I'm an ally of the Dao Tomb. I, Yi Xian, am duty-bound to do things for my allies." The corners of Qian Yaoyao's mouth curled up. "I like your shamelessness, Yi Xian." Qian Yaoyao returned to her seat. She picked up her teacup and took a small sip. After a short while she said, "This is a fortuitous encounter. A fortuitous encounter for my Dao Tomb. And a fortuitous encounter for you, Yi Xian. But I have to tell you this. The doubting will definitely intervene. It's just that I don't know how they will intervene. All we can do is block White Robe, and the others for you. You will have to face the remaining danger yourself. Is there a problem?" Yi Xian shook his head. "No problem." Qian Yaoyao nodded. "Then go." Yi Xian hesitated for a moment. "Miss Yaoyao, is the dark world dangerous?" Qian Yaoyao looked at Yi Xian. "It's very dangerous for others, but I don't think it's that dangerous for you." Yi Xian was puzzled. "Why?" The corners of Qian Yaoyao's mouth curled up. "Haven't you heard of this saying? A shameless person is invincible. I think you're invincible. What's a mere dark world to you?" Yi Xian's face darkened. "Was that even human?" Qi Yaoyao suddenly said seriously, "Be careful of the doubting. Be careful of that black vortex as well. The sudden appearance of that black vortex isn't normal. You have to be careful." Yi Xian said in a low voice, "Miss Yaoyao, have you gone in?" Qian Yaoyao nodded. "I have. However, I was only able to reach the edge of the black vortex. I can't take it any further." Yi Xian was puzzled. "Then what makes all of you think that I can take it?" Qian Yaoyao gazed at Yi Xian. "Do you know what it is that I can't take it?" Yi Xian was quite curious. "What is it?" Qian Yaoyao said softly, "Sword energy. Peerlessly powerful sword energy." "Sword energy?" Yi Xian was stunned, and then he said, "There's sword energy?" Qian Yaoyao nodded. "Extremely powerful sword energy. The reason we're letting you go is naturally not because we want you to give your life away. Since you can absorb sword energy, perhaps you can enter that vortex and investigate it." Yi Xian came to an understanding when he heard this. If it wasn't for this reason, the Dao Tomb probably wouldn't have told him about the black vortex at all. There are at least a dozen top-grade spirit veins in there. There are even transcendent-grade spirit veins. The Dao Tomb has come to find me because it has no other choice. When he thought up to this point, Yi Xian smiled and said, "I'll go." Qian Yaoyao nodded lightly. "Be careful." Yi Xian stood up and left. Meanwhile, Qian Yaoyao suddenly said, "Have you broken through?" Yi Xian turned around to look at Qian Yaoyao with a puzzled expression. "No." Qian Yaoyao gazed at Yi Xian. "You haven't?" Yi Xian nodded. "I'm still at the Dao corroboration realm." Qian Yaoyao smiled. "I thought you'd broken through." Yi Xian smiled. "Why does Miss Yaoyao say that?" Qian Yaoyao took a sip of tea and said, "Do you know why a person's feet are whiter than their hands?" Yi Xian was slightly puzzled. "Why?" Qian Yaoyao smiled. "Because your feet are always hidden. But if you're wearing sandals, then how would you hide them?" Yi Xian fell silent for a moment before he said softly, "Thank you." With that, he turned around and left. The moment he turned around, his expression was incomparably solemn. He knew that Qian Yaoyao had discovered his physical breakthrough. This time he had been careless. Although he had concealed his physical presence, he hadn't used the Prism Pagoda to conceal it. It was obvious that his current strength wasn't enough to hide from experts of Qian Yaoyao's level. He had to use the Prism Pagoda. Outside the hall, Yi Xian lightly patted his face and said softly, "I have to be more careful." With that, he turned into a streak of sword light and disappeared into the distance. Inside the hall, Qian Yaoyao swirled the teacup in her hand and said softly, "Physical body. Is it that scroll? Is it because of the Tao scripture?" With that, she slowly closed her eyes. Divine Palace. By Dizzy White Robe and the true martial Divine Lord were all here. They already knew about the black vortex in the dark world. At this moment, White Robe suddenly said, "My people have found out that the black vortex isn't a plot of the Tao tomb. However, the vortex contains extremely powerful sword qi. Luo Ho and Qian Yaoyao don't dare to enter it." By Dizzy suddenly said, "Yi Xian will go." White Robe looked at Yi Xian. "Why?" By Dizzy said softly, "Because that shameless guy can absorb sword qi." With that, he frowned slightly. What a coincidence. This black vortex seems to have appeared for Yi Xian. The true martial Divine Lord suddenly said, "White Robe, you've been to the dark world. What's inside?" White Robe was silent for a moment, then said, "Turbid qi, a lot of it. It can corrode a person's lifespan and physical body." True Martial frowned slightly. "Can't resist it?" White Robe shook his head. "Difficult to resist. The deeper you go, the more turbid qi there is. If you come into contact with too much of it, you will enter the Angel Decay Stage 5 early." True Martial was silent. The Angel Decay Stage 5. Once you entered this state, you were not far from death. By Dizzy suddenly said, "Can Yi Xian resist the turbid qi?" White Robe shook his head. "In terms of strength, he can't. Far from it. But this person is quite mysterious. I'm not sure if he has any other way to resist the turbid qi." By Dizzy was silent. In his heart, this Yi Xian was omnipotent. At this moment, the true martial Divine Lord suddenly said, "This might be our chance. A chance to kill Yi Xian. Because after he enters the dark world, the experts of the Tao tomb won't be able to enter. If we kill him in there, the Tao tomb won't be able to intervene." White Robe shook his head. "We can't enter the Tao tomb either." The true martial Divine Lord suddenly said softly, Taoist robe. Taoist robe." By Dizzy frowned. "Can it resist the turbid qi?" With that, he looked at White Robe. After a moment of silence, White Robe said, "It can resist it for about an hour. But the Taoist robe will be destroyed. Moreover, Yi Xian will go to that small vortex, but he might not enter the dark world. If he doesn't enter the dark world and stays at the edge of the dark world, the tomb of Tao will immediately attack us." The true martial Divine Lord said solemnly, "Bet that he will enter the dark world." "Bet." Both By Dizzy and White Robe were silent. The true martial Divine Lord looked at White Robe. "If you attack Yi Xian alone, how confident are you that you can kill him?" White Robe said, 80%. That's if he hasn't reached Tao Imperial. The true martial Divine Lord slowly closed his eyes. 80%. That's enough. It's worth the bet. With that, he looked at By Dizzy. By Dizzy stood up. "I'll go get the Taoist robe." With that, he turned and disappeared. In the hall, the true martial Divine Lord said softly, "Unfortunately, this person isn't doubting. Otherwise, he would be able to help us destroy the Tao tomb. If Yi Xian was doubting and doubting, he would definitely have a chance to reach the level of a Tao ancestor in the future. Moreover, if another expert of this level were to appear, then destroying the Tao tomb would be a piece of cake. Unfortunately, Yi Xian wasn't doubting. Not only that, but they had to get rid of Yi Xian. At all costs. Chapter 1386. Dark World. When Yi Xian arrived in the dark world, his expression turned grave. The dark world was pitch black, and within that pitch black space, there were some air currents that made him feel threatened. Turbid air. Even Tao manipulation experts would find it hard to resist these air currents. Yi Xian looked to his right and saw a pitch-black vortex not far away. The vortex was huge, and he could feel pure spiritual energy and sword qi in its depths. Sword qi. Yi Xian was curious, just how strong was this sword qi? Even experts like Qian Yaoyao and Luo Ho found it hard to resist. Could it be left behind by the three swords? Yi Xian walked towards the black vortex. Yi Jiming suddenly said, "Be careful." Yi Xian nodded. He naturally didn't dare to be careless in a place like Heaven Abyss. Soon Yi Xian approached the black vortex. As if thinking of something, he turned to look, but there was no one in the distance. But he knew someone was in the dark. Some were from the Dao court, and some were from the Dao tomb. Yi Xian was silent where he stood. Yi Jiming suddenly asked, "What is it?" Yi Xian chuckled. "What do you think doubting will do to kill me?" Yi Jiming was silent. Yi Xian looked at the black vortex, and after a long silence he quickly walked into it. Somewhere in the dark, Luo Ho whispered, "Can he even absorb the sword qi in there?" Bitter King and Qian Yaoyao were beside Luo Ho. Qian Yaoyao smiled. "We'll know soon enough." As she spoke, she turned her head and looked somewhere. "What do you think the Dao court will do?" Bitter King said solemnly, "He won't give up." Qian Yaoyao slowly closed her eyes. No one knew what she was thinking. Luo Ho suddenly said, "Why is there sword qi in there?" Qi Yaorao said, "Because someone went in?" "Who?" Bitter King asked. Qian Yaoyao shook her head. "I don't know." As she spoke, she glanced at the dark world in the distance and said softly, "Ever since I found out about Mu Ninian, I've realized that we've become slightly weak." Before she met Mu Ninian, she had always felt that they were the most powerful people in this world. However, after meeting Mu Ninian, she suddenly realized that they were very weak. This was the way of the world. When you thought you had reached the ceiling, little did you know that there was an even higher existence. On the other side, Bai Dizzy and True Martial Divine Lord were watching in secret. They had investigated this new black vortex for a long time, but to no avail. They didn't fight over it, because it was meaningless. There was a powerful sword qi inside. If they couldn't enter the Dao tomb, they couldn't enter either. However, Yi Xian could enter. Could Yi Xian absorb the sword qi inside? They were curious as well. The sword qi inside was no ordinary sword qi. Even experts like Qian Yaoyao and Luo Ho couldn't resist it. How terrifying was it? Could Yi Xian absorb such a powerful sword qi? After Yi Xian entered the vortex, a wave of pure spirit qi hit him in the face. Yi Xian quickened his pace, and soon arrived at a starry sky. There was another world inside this vortex. The starry sky was deep and boundless. At this moment, he suddenly turned around, because he sensed a strand of sword qi in the distant depths. An unfamiliar sword qi. He was more familiar with the sword qi of the three swords, but the sword qi before him didn't belong to any of them. After a moment of silence, Yi Xian walked toward the source of the sword qi. The further he went, the more serious Yi Xian's expression became. Not only did he feel a powerful sword qi, but also a powerful sword force. It was countless times stronger than the true martial divine lord's sword force. At this moment, Yi Xian was a little shocked. Apart from the three swords and Sister Nian, there was actually such a powerful swordsman in this world? Who was it? Yi Xian's curiosity grew. At this moment he suddenly stopped. A corpse floated dozens of feet in front of him. Yi Xian sized up the corpse. There was a sword mark on the corpse's throat. A single slash. Yi Xian walked up to the corpse and took a look at it. The body was still there, but the soul was gone. It must have been annihilated. Yi Xian frowned slightly. He lifted his head and looked into the distance. What on earth was this place? Yi Xian's curiosity grew, and he became even more cautious. Although he had cultivated a Dao body, that didn't mean he was invincible. He couldn't be arrogant at any time. Yi Xian continued walking forward. After walking for a short while he suddenly stopped. At this moment, a beam of sword energy cut through the air and slashed towards him. The sword qi was like a bolt of lightning. By the time Yi Xian sensed it, the sword qi was already in front of him. Yi Xian's expression changed. He didn't expect the sword qi to be so fast. At this moment, he didn't even have a chance to fight back. He could only let the sword chi cut him. At this moment, Yi Xian only hoped that his invincible sword body would be useful. Chi. As a tearing sound came, Yi Xian retreated almost 10,000 feet away. As soon as he stopped, the space around him cracked, and the cracks spread tens of thousands of miles away in an instant. And there was a sword chi stuck in Yi Xian's chest. Yi Xian's body stiffened in the starry sky. His expression was extremely solemn, because his body couldn't absorb the sword chi. However, the sword chi couldn't hurt him either. Even though the sword chi had entered his body, it didn't hurt him. However, he couldn't absorb the sword chi either. It was very strange. Even Yi Xian was confused. What's going on? Meanwhile, Yi Jiming suddenly said, the sword chi can't hurt you, but your physique can't absorb it either. So there's only one explanation. Your invincible sword body is very strong, but you're not strong enough to absorb the sword chi. The sword chi's owner's attainments in the sword Dao might be similar to Mu Nianyan's, only inferior to 3 swords. Only inferior to 3 swords. Yi Xian frowned slightly. He looked into the distance. There's such a powerful swordsman in this world. After a moment of silence, Yi Xian slowly pulled out the sword chi. One could tell a person just by looking at the sword chi. Yi Xian's expression gradually became solemn as he looked at the sword chi in his hand. The sword chi's owner's attainments in the sword Dao were probably only inferior to 3 swords. As for Sister Nian, he hadn't seen her at her peak, so he didn't know who was stronger between the sword chi's owner and Sister Nian. At this moment, Yi Jiming suddenly said, the sword chi isn't resisting? Hearing this, Yi Xian was stunned. Only now did he realize that the sword chi in his hand didn't resist? What's going on? Yi Xian looked at the sword chi in his hand. The sword chi was trembling slightly, but it didn't resist him. Yi Jiming said in a low voice, don't tell me the sword chi's owner is related to you again. She was speechless towards Yi Xian. How many people does this guy have backing? Not to mention her. Even he himself probably doesn't know. Wherever he goes, he has backing. Yi Xian said in a low voice, I've never seen the sword chi's aura before, so I don't think I know the sword chi's owner. Yi Jiming said in a low voice, just because you don't know him doesn't mean he doesn't know you. Yi Xian was speechless. Yi Jiming continued, no matter what, since the sword chi isn't resisting you, it means that the sword chi's owner might know you. Let's go ahead and take a look. Yi Xian nodded slightly and put the sword chi away. Although the sword chi had left its owner, with the sword Dao's attainments, the sword chi would last for at least 10,000 years. 15 minutes later, Yi Xian suddenly stopped on his sword. There was a top grade or vein not far away from him. A top grade or vein. Yi Xian was slightly excited. He and the others had entered the Orvane, but when they entered, Yi Xian was stunned. This top grade or vein was filled to the brim with fortune divine crystals. There were at least 300,000 of them. 300,000 divine fortune crystals. What did that mean? Yi Xian was so excited that he almost couldn't control himself. The ore vein here had not been developed by anyone, so it contained a large number of divine fortune crystals. Most importantly, these divine fortune crystals were different from the ones he had seen outside. They were completely different. These divine fortune crystals were the size of a fist and were dark purple in color. The energy contained within them was several times purer than the divine fortune crystals outside. At this moment, Yi Jiming suddenly said softly, these divine fortune crystals have not been taken away by anyone. They can grow continuously in this or vein. Congratulations, you're rich. Yi Xian was so happy that he couldn't close his mouth. How many experts could be nurtured in the 5th dimension, with more than 300,000 pure divine crystals of fortune? He could nurture a large number of Dao validation and Dao defense realm experts. Most importantly, there was more than just this top grade or vein in this black hole. Thinking of this, Yi Xian couldn't help but laugh. Yi Xian hurriedly put away the divine fortune crystals. Not only did he put away the divine fortune crystals, but he also put away the entire or vein. At this moment, he also understood one thing, and that was that the longer these divine fortune crystals stayed in this or vein, the better. After putting away the divine fortune crystals and the top grade or vein, Yi Xian continued forward. At this moment, Another sword chi slashed at him from afar. However, he didn't panic at all. As he expected, the sword chi stopped 5 feet in front of him. Yi Xian put away the sword chi. He continued forward. Along the way, Yi Xian walked with the wind, feeling very proud of himself. Along the way, Yi Xian suddenly smiled. Jiming, do you have any thoughts? Yi Jiming was silent for a moment before saying, Cheater. Yi Xian blinked. What do you mean? Yi Jiming said calmly. I saw this phrase in an ancient book. It said that it came from the Milky Way realm. It means that if you don't abide by the rules, your life will be like cheaters, just like you are now. Yi Xian frowned slightly. Why does it sound like a bad phrase to me? Yi Jiming said. I don't know either. In any case, many of the words there are a bit strange. I looked at that ancient book, and was also confused, because I couldn't explain many of the words. For example, this cheater. What is cheater? What is cheater? Why is it combined to describe people who don't abide by the rules? I can't understand it. Yi Xian. P.S. I don't ask for votes, I don't ask for rewards, just write more and write a good book. Chapter 1387. Cheater? Yi Xian shook his head. What a strange word. Yi Jiming suddenly said. Don't dwell on this problem. It's meaningless. Yi Xian nodded and sped up. Along the way, he encountered more sword chi, and he noticed that these sword chi were scattered in space, and would attack anyone they saw. Obviously, a great battle had happened in this part of space. After flying on the sword for about an hour, Yi Xian saw another vein. There were over 200,000 fortune divine crystals in that vein. Without any hesitation, Yi Xian put away the vein. Now he had 2 top-grade veins, and over 400,000 fortune divine crystals. This was simply a sudden windfall. Even though the number of fortune divine crystals was increasing, Yi Xian felt uneasy. There was clearly something wrong with this place. Besides sword chi and veins, he also saw corpses along the way. Judging from the corpses, they were all super experts when they were alive. After a while, Yi Xian suddenly stopped. In the starry sky not far away from him, there was a giant starship floating in the sky. The entire starship was like a ghost floating in the starry sky. Extremely creepy and creepy. Yi Xian frowned slightly. What the hell is that? Yi Jiming suddenly said. Be careful. Yi Xian nodded, and walked towards the starship. When he got close to it, he felt a powerful aura again. Yi Xian stopped in his tracks, and he became even more vigilant. Just as he was about to slip away, the starship shook violently, and then footsteps came from inside the starship. The corners of Yi Xian's mouth twitched. Someone's here. Yi Xian looked at the starship in front of him. Under his gaze, an old man walked out from the starship. The old man wore a loose gray robe, and he held a walking stick in his hand. His aura was faint, and it was extremely strange. Yi Xian looked at the old man, but he didn't say a word. At this moment, the old man was also looking at Yi Xian. After a short moment, the old man suddenly said in a hoarse voice, Why aren't you afraid of the sword chi? Yi Xian waved the sword in his hand. I'm also a swordsman. The elder stared at Yi Xian. Your attainments in the sword Dao are far inferior to the owner of this sword energy. Yi Xian said, All swordsmen in the world are one family. We don't fight each other. The old man frowned. What nonsense are you talking about? Yi Xian was speechless. The old man continued. Those sword chi won't hurt you. What is your relationship with the owner of the sword chi? Yi Xian thought for a moment, and then he said, It's my first time here, so I don't know why that sword chi didn't harm me. This time he wasn't fooling around. What a joke. If the owner of the sword chi had a grudge against this old man, then wouldn't he be courting death? The old man looked at Yi Xian without saying a word. Yi Xian sized up the surroundings and said, Senior, where are we? The old man replied, The dark dimension. Yi Xian spoke in a low voice. Senior, are you from the depths of the dark dimension? The old man shook his head. I'm from the outside world. Yi Xian blinked. The outside world? The old man gazed at Yi Xian and didn't speak. Yi Xian's heart shook. Damn it. This old man wants to kill me. Because he sensed a strand of killing intent. Even though the old man's killing intent was very well concealed, he'd still noticed it. Because he'd attained his Tao through slaughter, so he was extremely sensitive to killing intent. The old man's right hand slowly clenched tightly within his wide sleeves. Meanwhile, Yixian suddenly said, "Senior, to tell you the truth, I'm here to look for my dad." The old man frowned slightly. "Dad?" Yixian nodded. "Yes. Senior, have you seen him?" The old man gazed at Yixian. "No. Damn it. Who knows who your dad is?" Meanwhile, Yixian opened his palm. Instantly, the blood in his body trembled. Bloodline power. When he saw Yixian's bloodline power, the old man's expression changed. Yixian looked at the old man. "My dad's bloodline is the same as mine. Senior, have you seen someone with such a bloodline?" The old man stared fixedly at the boiling blood in Yixian's body. His expression gradually became solemn. Needless to say, he was quite shocked at this moment. What bloodline is this? It's actually so strong. Who is this young man in front of me? Meanwhile, Yixian suddenly retracted his bloodline power. He cupped his fists at the old man and asked, "I wonder if Senior has seen him before?" The old man was silent for a moment and shook his head. "Never." With that, he paused for a moment and said, "Young friend, your bloodline power is quite special." At this moment, his killing intent was gone. What was the thing that a person was most afraid of in their lifetime of cultivation? They were afraid of forming evil karma and bad karma. This world was too dangerous, so one had to be extremely careful in the outside world. Especially some people that one absolutely couldn't afford to offend. Once they did, it would be like stirring a hornet's nest. If one were to beat the young, then the old would come. And if one were to beat the old, then a group of old would come. But this young man before him was obviously someone with backing, and it was no ordinary backing. Once he killed him, there would be no end to future troubles. Yixian smiled. "Senior's aura is as deep as the ocean. I'm afraid you've attained the Tao, right?" The old man nodded. "Attained the Tao." The corners of Yixian's mouth twitched. "Damn it. This old man has attained the Tao. No wonder I felt so dangerous. I've actually encountered a Tao realm expert." One must know that even if the Tao court and the Tao tomb were to be added together, there were only 4 cultivators at the Tao realm. Meanwhile, the old man spoke abruptly. "With your strength, you shouldn't have stepped foot here." Yixian spoke in a low voice. "Senior, what sort of place is the dark dimension?" The old man hesitated for a moment and said, "You don't know, yet you still dared to come here." Yixian blinked and said, "Is this place very dangerous?" The old man gazed at Yixian. "Isn't it?" Yixian glanced at the surroundings and smiled embarrassedly. "I don't think it's dangerous at all." The old man was speechless. "Not dangerous? I almost killed you just now. You're not dangerous at all." Yixian spoke with a serious expression. "My older brother said that you shouldn't be afraid of death. Young man, don't be afraid of death. You should temper yourself." The old man gazed at Yixian. "Your older brother?" Yixian nodded, and then he withdrew a sword from the top of the pagoda. "My older brother gave this to me." It was the sword of the swordsman who wore a cloud-white robe. The old man's expression instantly turned solemn when he saw the sword of the founding ancestor of the immortal banished island. The stronger one was, the more one would be able to sense how formidable those 3 swords were. The old man gazed at Yixian. "This is your older brother?" Yixian nodded. "Yes." The old man hesitated for a moment. "Young friend, you." Needless to say, he was quite shocked at this moment. Who exactly is this young man? Yixian glanced at the surroundings, and then he said, "Senior, have you been to the depths of the dark dimension?" The old man shook his head. "I haven't. There's muddy energy there, and it's difficult for ordinary people to resist it." As he spoke, he gazed at Yixian. "It's best that you don't go there as well. The muddy energy there isn't something you can resist right now." Yixian nodded. "I'm not going." The old man cupped his fists. "Young friend, I have something to attend to, so I'll be taking my leave." Obviously, he intended to ask Yixian to get off the pagoda. Yixian spoke in a low voice. "Senior, do you know the origins of this sword energy?" The old man shook his head. "I don't know. I only know that a great battle took place here in the past." At this point, he seemed to have thought of something, and he gazed at Yi Xian. Young friend, this sword energy isn't able to harm you? Yi Xian grinned, and then he took out a strand of sword energy. I don't know why this sword energy isn't able to harm me. The old man fell silent as he gazed at the sword energy in Yi Xian's hand that didn't resist it. The sword energy actually didn't resist. What the hell? The old man found it hard to comprehend. Meanwhile, Yi Xian spoke abruptly. Senior, may I ask why you're here? The old man replied. To settle some matters. Yi Xian spoke in a low voice. Senior, please forgive me for speaking out of turn, but you're neither from the Doubting Dao Tomb, right? The old man nodded. No. However, I've heard of these two powers. Are you from the Doubting Dao Tomb, or the Doubting Dao Tomb? Yi Xian smiled. I'm from the fifth dimension, and I'm temporarily allied with the Doubting Dao Tomb. The old man frowned. As far as I know, the Doubting Dao ancestor is the only one with decent strength, but your father and brother should be able to kill him without any pressure. Yi Xian bitterly smiled. There's no other way. They want to train me so that I can face everything by myself. Unless it's absolutely necessary, they won't make a move. The old man was silent. It's good to have a backer. You can do whatever you want. The old man withdrew his thoughts and glanced at Yi Xian. Young friend, I still have something to do, so I'll take my leave first. Yi Xian smiled. Senior, farewell. As soon as he finished speaking, he left the starship. The old man cupped his fists and was about to leave. Meanwhile, he seemed to have thought of something, and he hesitated for a moment before he said, Young friend, there's a ruin up ahead, and it used to belong to an ancient power. I came here for that ruin. However, that ancient ruin is slightly special. Not only is there a huge amount of muddy qi outside, there's even powerful sword qi there. The sword qi is so strong that even I can't resist it. When he spoke up to this point, he paused for a moment before he continued. Young friend, are you interested in going with me to have a look? Yi Xian blinked but didn't speak. Why did this old man invite me? As if he knew what Yi Xian was thinking, the old man smiled. I have no ill intentions towards you. To be honest, I've been investigating some matters in the outside world for the past few years, and I just happened to find that ruin. However, the sword qi there is extremely strong, and even I can't resist it. I originally wanted to give up, but after I met you. Yi Xian understood when he heard this. The old man smiled. The sword qi isn't able to harm you, so it shouldn't be a problem if you intend to enter the ruin. Yi Xian fell silent. The old man continued. Don't worry, I won't take any of the wealth there. I'm only going there to investigate something. Yi Xian smiled. How could that do? I'll go with you, and we'll split the wealth equally. The old man grinned. To tell you the truth, old man isn't an independent cultivator, so wealth is like floating clouds to me. Yi Xian thought for a moment before he smiled. Senior, let's go. As soon as he finished speaking, Yi Xian sat on the old man's starship and continued forward. It didn't take long for an enormous stone door to appear within Yi Xian's field of vision. There were two large words above the stone door, Sword Sect. The Sword Sect. Yi Xian was stunned when he saw these two words. The Sword Sect. To Yi Xian, this trip to the Sword Sect was like returning home. It was extremely intimate. Chapter 1388. The Sword Sect. There was a turbid aura drifting around the stone door. Apart from that, there was also some sword aura drifting around. The sword energy was very strong, extremely strong. The old man had a solemn expression in his eyes when he saw the sword energy. He'd been here once in the past, but he hadn't dared to go over. The muddy energy wasn't too bad because he could resist it, but the sword energy was strong to the point of killing him. If it was just pure sword energy, then he could resist it. But this place was quite strange, and he didn't want to take the risk. Actually, he was extremely shocked when he'd just arrived here. Whose sword energy is still so strong even after a few tens of thousands of years? The old man sighed in his heart. As expected, there's always someone stronger in the world. Meanwhile, Yi Xian walked towards the stone door. The old man hurriedly said, Young brother, be careful. Yi Xian nodded, and walked towards the stone door. Even though he was confident in his ability, he still didn't dare be careless. When he arrived over 30 m away from the stone door, the sword energy that drifted around the stone door suddenly stopped moving. In the next moment, the sword energy transformed into rays of light that slashed towards Yi Xian. The old man's expression instantly changed drastically when he witnessed this scene. But he was stunned in the next moment, because the countless rays of sword energy had stopped in front of Yi Xian. All the rays of sword energy had stopped in front of Yi Xian. The old man blinked. Are they really not going to target this fellow? Yi Xian heaved a sigh of relief when he saw the rays of sword energy stop. The rays of sword energy were extremely formidable, and it would be extremely troublesome if they were really targeting him, because his sword was temporarily unable to absorb them. Yi Xian didn't think too much about it, and put them away. Meanwhile, the old man walked over to Yi Xian's side, and then he glanced at Yi Xian, and exclaimed with admiration, "Young brother, you're truly an extraordinary person." Yi Xian smiled. "Senior, do you have a way to deal with the muddy energy?" The old man nodded. "The muddy energy here is much inferior to the depths of the dark dimension. I can deal with it." Yi Xian smiled and said, "Then let's go in." The two of them continued forward. Along the way, the old man waved his right hand, and the turbid energy was blocked by a mysterious force. Yi Xian glanced at the old man. This old man's strength was not ordinary. Behind the mountain gate were some ancient buildings. However, these buildings were extremely dilapidated. Some of them had even collapsed into ruins. It was obvious that a great battle had taken place here. At this time, the two of them arrived in front of a large hall. Half of the hall had already collapsed, leaving only the other half. It looked very desolate. Right at this moment, the old man suddenly said, "Young friend, watch out." With that said, he waved his right hand, and a black shadow in front of Yi Xian was directly pushed back. Yi Xian gripped the sword tightly in his left hand. He looked at the black shadow. The shadow dissipated, revealing an illusory middle-aged man. A soul body. Although it was a soul body, the other party's aura was very powerful. Inside Yi Xian's body, the soul-suppressing sword was ready to strike. The middle-aged man looked at the old man, reaching the Tao. The old man was expressionless, but his eyes flickered with killing intent. A mere dark abyss spirit dares to act rashly in front of this honored one. With that said, he pointed forward with his fingers, and a wave of cold and gloomy energy swept out. In the distance, the middle-aged man's expression changed drastically. He suddenly punched out. Boom! With a loud explosion, the middle-aged man retreated rapidly. This time he retreated hundreds of feet away. But the old man did not retreat a single step. Yi Xian glanced at the old man. This old man's strength was definitely above Luo Hu and the others. Reaching the Tao realm, he was really strong. The middle-aged man stared at the old man. "You know I come from the dark abyss. You are from the ancient god abyss." The old man was about to attack. Yi Xian suddenly smiled and said, "Senior, please wait." The old man looked at Yi Xian. Yi Xian said, "Senior, you should also want to know what happened here, right?" After a moment of silence, the old man looked at the middle-aged man. "What happened here?" The middle-aged man did not speak, but stared at Yi Xian. "You are from the sword sect." Yi Xian frowned. "Just because I am a swordsman, you think I am from the sword sect?" The middle-aged man did not speak. Yi Xian looked at the old man. "Senior, what kind of place is this dark abyss? Is it the dark world?" The old man shook his head. "No, the dark abyss is a place more terrifying than the dark world." With that said, he looked at the middle-aged man. "Who killed you?" The middle-aged man said in a low voice, "A woman." "Woman?" The old man frowned. "How many of you died?" The middle-aged man slowly clenched his fists, and his expression was ferocious. "More than 30. Yi Xian suddenly asked. "More than 30 reaching the Tao realm?" The middle-aged man glanced at Yi Xian. 12 reaching the Tao realm. 18 Tao defense realm peak. Hearing this, Yi Xian fell silent. He was shocked. 12 reaching the Tao realm. What did this mean? What kind of place was this dark abyss? Why was it so strong? At this moment, the old man suddenly said, "More than 30 of you were all killed by a woman?" The middle-aged man ignored the old man and looked at Yi Xian. Her sword aura did not hurt you. What's your relationship with her? Yi Xian was silent. He was sure that the owner of the sword aura was not Qing Er, and among the women he knew, only Qing Er and Sister Nian's sword aura were this strong. Apart from those two, he did not know any other female swordsman. At this moment the middle-aged man said, "What's your relationship with her?" Yi Xian looked at the middle-aged man. "Take a guess." The old man was speechless. The middle-aged man was stunned, and then he spoke in a low voice. "She killed many of us." Yi Xian's eyelids twitched. "I didn't kill her. What does it have to do with me?" The middle-aged man looked at Yi Xian. "What's the difference between her killing him and you killing him?" Yi Xian flew into a rage. "Are you kidding me? Why is there no difference between her killing and me killing? Go and find her if you can." The middle-aged man was expressionless. "Killing you is the same." Yi Xian was so angry that his chest hurt. Damn it, he was obviously picking on the weak one. Thinking up to here, Yi Xian opened his palm, and the soul-suppressing sword appeared in his hand. In the next moment, the soul-suppressing sword transformed into a ray of sword light and flew out. In the distance, the middle-aged man's face drastically changed. He did not attack, but turned around and fled. His speed was extremely fast, and he disappeared into the distance in the blink of an eye. Yi Xian and the old man were both stunned. Yi Xian's face was a little ugly. Damn it, that guy ran away. That person was at least at the Dao attainment realm. Although it was only a soul, if the other party chose to escape, there was nothing he could do. Damn it, that guy wouldn't call someone to beat me up, would he? Thinking up to here, Yi Xian's face became even uglier. The reason why the other party did not dare to escape before must be because of the sword chi. But now he had taken away all the sword chi. Thinking up to here, Yi Xian was speechless. At this moment, the old man glanced at the soul-suppressing sword in front of Yi Xian. "Young friend, your sword has reached the Dao attainment realm. What a good sword." Yi Xian withdrew his thoughts and smiled. "It's just SOSO." Saying so, he put away the soul-suppressing sword. The old man said in a low voice, "Young friend, this dark yuan is not simple. You and them." Yi Xian sighed softly. "Senior, you saw it too. I have no enmity with them, but they insisted on pestering me. Tell me, is there any justice in this world? Is there any law in this world?" The old man hesitated for a moment and said, "Young friend, your identity isn't simple, so there's no need to pay too much attention to this dark yuan. However, you still have to be careful in the future." Yi Xian nodded. "Thank you for the reminder, senior." The old man nodded, and then he glanced at the surroundings. In the end, his gaze shot towards the depths of the ruined hall. There was a corpse there. There was a sword by the corpse's side. The old man walked over to the corpse and sized it up carefully. A short while later, he pressed his palm down lightly. "Condense." As soon as he finished speaking, the space in the surroundings suddenly trembled, and then an illusory soul appeared in front of the old man. The old man looked at the illusory soul. What happened here? The soul glanced at the surroundings in a daze. Suddenly, he looked at Yi Xian, and he was stunned when he saw Yi Xian. Yi Xian blinked. "Senior, you know me?" The soul looked at Yi Xian with slight disbelief. "You?" At this point he frowned. "How is this possible?" Yi Xian was slightly puzzled. "What do you mean?" The old man glanced at Yi Xian as well, and he was also bewildered. The soul fell silent for a long time before he said, "You have the ancestral master's aura on you." Yi Xian took out the sword spirit. "Is it this sword?" When he saw the sword, the soul took a deep look at Yi Xian. "You?" Yi Xian smiled. "I'm from the sword sect as well." The soul didn't speak. Meanwhile, the old man suddenly asked, "What exactly happened here?" The soul spoke softly. "Many years ago, our sword sect suffered a calamity. Some mysterious experts appeared in our sword sect and slaughtered our sword sect." Yi Xian asked why. The soul's expression was complicated. "Because of a super mineral vein." "A super mineral vein?" Yi Xian hurriedly asked. "A super mineral vein?" The soul nodded. "Our sword sect obtained a super mineral vein in the dark world. This mineral vein stretches for thousands of miles, and it has its own sentience. but we never thought that it would bring disaster to our sword sect. The old man said softly, a super mineral vein. No wonder the dark abyss would act. The soul spoke again. Back then, in order to avoid those experts, we used a formation to escape into the dark world. But we never thought that those people would be even more terrifying than we imagined. They were not afraid of the turbid gas at all, and directly entered the dark world to kill us. Yi Xian said gravely, but those experts from the dark abyss are also dead. Who killed them? The soul replied gravely, Ancestral Master. Yi Xian asked, the azure-robed man? The soul glanced at Yi Xian and shook his head. It's not Ancestral Master. Yi Xian was a little curious. It's not the azure-robed man. The soul nodded. It's Ancestral Master Ting Yun. Ting Yun. Yi Xian was stunned. He had heard Senior Sister Lu say this before, but he didn't take it to heart. Was Ting Yun that strong? At this moment, the old man suddenly said, Little friend, what's your relationship with this Senior Ting Yun? Yi Xian blinked and said, Senior Sister. She's my senior sister. The old man fell silent. Damn, your father is so freakish. Your big brother is also freakish. Your senior sister is also freakish. Who is this guy? Is his whole family so terrifying? P.S. Tickets. Chapter 1389. Ting Yun. Yi Xian was a little shocked at this moment, because he really didn't expect Ting Yun's strength to be so terrifying. Over a dozen completed Dao Realm experts had been killed. This was simply not treating completed Dao Realm experts as humans. At this time, the middle-aged man's soul gradually became illusory. Yi Xian looked at the old man. The old man shook his head. His soul was originally scattered. I forcefully gathered it. Now his soul is extremely weak, and is about to scatter from the world. Yi Xian thought for a moment, and then he opened his palm, and the soul-suppressing sword appeared in front of the middle-aged man. In the next moment, the soul-suppressing sword directly released a powerful soul force that enveloped the middle-aged man, and the middle-aged man's soul that was about to disperse suddenly condensed once more. A trace of surprise flashed through the old man's eyes when he saw this. He glanced at the soul-suppressing sword, but did not say anything. In front of Yi Xian, the middle-aged man shook his head and smiled. It's meaningless. To a certain extent, his soul had already been destroyed. Yi Xian fell silent for a moment before he said, I'll send you into reincarnation. Then, the mark of the god of reincarnation suddenly appeared between his brows. Seeing this scene, the old man was a little curious. Little friend, is this the reincarnation Great Tao? Yi Xian nodded. Senior, you also know about the reincarnation Great Tao. The old man smiled and said, Who doesn't know about the 3,000 Great Taos? This Samsara Grand Tao is ranked in the top 10 amongst the 3,000 Grand Taos. If you make good use of it, it'll be of great use in the future. Yi Xian blinked. What great use? The old man hesitated for a moment before he said, You don't know? Yi Xian shook his head. I don't know. I obtained this seal of the God's will of the reincarnation Tao by chance. He obtained it by chance. The old man was speechless. Meanwhile, Yi Xian suddenly smiled and said, Senior, let's talk later. With that, he looked at the middle-aged man. Sir, enter the cycle of reincarnation. The middle-aged man took a deep look at Yi Xian. Take care. With that, he entered the reincarnation cave. Soon, the middle-aged man's soul completely disappeared. Yi Xian kept the samsara seal and looked at the old man. Senior, what's the use of this samsara god seal? In the past, he'd used it to reach the Tao corroboration realm. Now that he'd reached the Tao corroboration realm, he hadn't used the samsara god seal in a very long time. The old man said, When you reach the Tao formation realm in the future, you can use the divine seal of samsara. Yi Xian blinked. This god's seal can help people achieve the Tao. The old man nodded. Sure. However, if you borrow the god's seal to reach the Tao, it will be very difficult. Furthermore, if you use this god's seal to achieve Tao, you will be the reincarnation Great Tao. Do you understand what I mean? Upon hearing this, Yi Xian understood. If he used the reincarnation god's seal to achieve the Tao, then he, Yi Xian, would become the god's seal. He, Yi Xian, would be the reincarnation Great Tao, one of the 3,000 Great Taos. Yi Xian gazed at the old man. Is there a problem with that? The old man spoke in a low voice. There's a huge problem. Because it'll be difficult for you to break through again. The grand Tao of Samsara isn't a Tao that you've come up with on your own. It's the Tao of someone else. The grand Tao of Samsara itself has reached its end. If you become it, then it means that attaining the Tao will be your end, and it'll be extremely difficult for you to continue breaking through. However, attaining the Tao is the lifelong pursuit of many, and it all depends on one's own choice. Yi Xian nodded and spoke softly. I understand. The old man smiled. Young brother, I came here to investigate the dark abyss. Now that I've finished my investigation, I have to return to report on my mission. Yi Xian gazed at the old man. Senior, what's your name? The old man hesitated for a moment before he said, Su Ku. Yi Xian cupped his fists. Senior Su Ku, we'll meet again. Su Ku cupped his fists as well. Young brother, we'll meet again. As soon as he finished speaking, he was about to leave. However, he seemed to have thought of something and said, Young brother, that expert from the dark abyss has fled. You have to be careful of the dark abyss, because it isn't a simple place. Yi Xian nodded. Thank you for the warning, senior. Su Ku continued. Besides that, the muddy energy in the depths of the dark world is extremely strong. Young brother, you must not continue forward, because you'll enter the depths of the dark world if you continue forward. The muddy energy there isn't something you can resist right now. Yi Xian turned around and glanced at the distance, but there was only pitch-black darkness at the end of his vision. The depths of the dark world? Yi Xian fell into deep contemplation. Su Ku didn't speak another word, and he just turned around and left. After Su Ku left, Yi Xian started to plunder the top-grade ores like a madman. About 2 hours later, Yi Xian had obtained 6 top-grade mineral veins, and more than 1,300,000 divine crystals of fortune. Over 1,300,000 divine fortune crystals. What sort of concept was that? It could be said that even the entire doubting and the Tao tomb combined couldn't compare to his wealth. Of course, he also plundered the experts' corpses. He buried the sword sex experts' corpses properly, while the dark abyss experts' corpses were also plundered. His harvest wasn't small at all. There were several tens of thousands of divine fortune crystals, and all kinds of treasures. A huge windfall. After plundering, Yi Xian didn't choose to leave. Instead, he looked towards the depths of the dark world. There must be more top-grade ores in the depths of the dark world, because he could already feel the dense spiritual energy there. At this time, Yi Jiming's voice suddenly sounded. Don't be greedy. Yi Xian nodded and turned to leave. He was satisfied with his harvest today. Right at this time he stopped again. Yi Jiming asked, What is it? Yi Xian said solemnly. Jiming, I almost forgot something. Yi Jiming asked, What is it? Yi Xian said softly, I've already become a Tao physique. Do you think my Tao physique can resist the turbid qi? Yi Jiming fell silent. Yi Xian suddenly smiled. The Tao scripture is known as the number 1 body tempering technique, and the Tao physique is known as the number 1 constitution. I'm curious, can the Tao physique resist the turbid qi? Yi Jiming said, Why don't you give it a try? She was also curious. This is a Tao scripture martial art. Yi Xian nodded and looked around. There were still some turbid qi drifting around the sword sect. His body trembled, and he appeared in front of a strand of turbid qi, grabbing it with his right hand. Yi Xian stared at the strand of turbid qi. A moment later he smiled, because nothing happened to his body at all. The turbid qi had no effect on his Tao physique. Yi Xian looked at the strand of turbid qi in his hand. As if he thought of something, he suddenly loosened his grip and allowed the turbid qi to enter his body. Nothing happened to him after the turbid qi entered his body. Yi Xian slowly closed his eyes and said excitedly, Jiming, I have a great plan. Yi Jiming asked, What plan? The corner of Yi Xian's lips curled up slightly. The next moment, he disappeared on the spot. Not long later, Yi Xian entered the depths of the dark realm. When he arrived at the depths of the dark realm, Yi Xian discovered that his surroundings were pitch black and filled with turbid qi. The turbid qi here was extremely dense. Not to mention Dao controlling experts. Even Dao attainment experts wouldn't dare to step into this place recklessly. This time, Yi Xian did not look for any top-grade mineral veins. Instead, he frantically absorbed the turbid qi. He used his body as a vessel and absorbed all the turbid qi into his body. When it reached a certain level, Yi Xian opened his palm, and a sword quietly formed in his hand. It was a sword condensed from turbid qi. Apart from that, tens of thousands of qi swords suddenly appeared around him. All of them were qi swords formed from turbid qi. Seeing this scene, Yi Xian couldn't help but laugh. His Dao body was immune to the turbid qi, but not everyone had a Dao body. These 10,000 qi swords formed from turbid qi were even more terrifying than the soul-suppressing sword, because these qi swords would kill upon contact. Ordinary experts wouldn't be able to withstand the turbid qi at all. Once touched, they would immediately enter heavenly decay. Yi Xian didn't stop, and continued to absorb the turbid qi. After absorbing it, he immediately condensed the turbid qi into swords. Inside the prism pagoda, Yi Jiming was silent as she watched Yi Xian frantically condense swords. The cause of misfortune? She was starting to suspect that this was the cause of misfortune. She was actually starting to sympathize with Doubting. If this went on, Doubting would be toyed to death by Yi Xian. About 4 hours later, Yi Xian absorbed all the turbid qi within hundreds of thousands of miles, and condensed it into swords. And now, he had a total of 120,000 swords. All of them were condensed from turbid qi, and with his current strength, forget about 120,000 swords. He could even control 500,000 swords. Of course, the reason why he didn't do this before was because the sword qi was more refined than quantity. But it was different now. These swords were special. It could be said that these swords formed from turbid qi didn't require much of his strength at all. These swords formed from turbid qi themselves carried a strange power. He just needed to control these swords. It was that simple. Yi Xian put away all of the swords and walked towards the depths of the dark world. However, he didn't walk for long when he suddenly stopped. He suddenly turned around. Not far in front of him, a powerful aura swept over. Yi Xian's brows furrowed slightly. Soon a white figure appeared in front of him. White robe. Seeing white robe, Yi Xian was expressionless. This Doubting really didn't give up. White robe glanced at the surroundings and frowned slightly. Why isn't there any turbid qi here? Yi Xian looked at white robe and didn't speak. White robe looked at Yi Xian. You did it. Yi Xian slowly clenched his right hand. At this moment white robe said again, you can ignore the turbid qi. Yi Xian didn't speak. White robe looked deeply at Yi Xian. He didn't choose to attack, but turned around and left. Yi Xian didn't choose to attack either, because he wasn't confident that he could kill white robe. And he didn't want to expose this turbid qi now. This would be a killer move that he would leave for Doubting. On the spot, Yi Xian was silent for a moment, before he continued walking towards the depths of the dark world. He wanted to go to the deepest part to take a look. The depths of the dark world, which was also the depths of the celestial abyss. What exactly was there? About an hour later, Yi Xian's brows gradually furrowed because he felt an invisible pressure. This pressure was like several mountains pressing down on him, making it difficult for him to breathe. An hour later, Yi Xian stopped in his tracks. He didn't dare to continue forward, because he felt that he couldn't breathe. That pressure was too strong. What exactly was in the depths of the dark world? Yi Xian was silent for a moment before he turned around and left. At this moment, a pitch-black hand suddenly landed on his shoulder. Without a sound. Chapter 1390. Yi Xian did not dare to move, and that hand just rested on his shoulder. Yi Xian did not sense anyone behind him, and that was the most terrifying thing. There was clearly someone, and the other party had a hand on his shoulder, but he could not sense the other party. Who was it? Yi Xian turned around, but there was nothing in front of him. There was nothing. Yi Xian fell silent. In the next moment, Yi Xian turned around and ran. Hee hee. At this moment, a strange laughter suddenly sounded from all around him. Yi Xian stopped and glanced around, but he did not find anything. After a moment of silence, Yi Xian continued forward. At this moment, the space in front of him suddenly split open, and a face suddenly appeared in front of him. It was the face of a little girl. The little girl's face was as pale as a sheet, and her hair was disheveled, covering half of her face. At this moment, the little girl was staring at him with a sinister smile. It had to be said that Yi Xian was shocked. Yi Xian looked at the little girl in front of him and grinned. Seeing Yi Xian smile, the little girl was slightly taken aback. In the next moment, she grabbed Yi Xian's throat, and a powerful force locked onto Yi Xian. The moment the little girl made a move, Yi Xian's soul-subduing sword suddenly unsheathed. Chi! As a cutting sound rang out, the human face disappeared, and Yi Xian retreated thousands of feet away. As soon as Yi Xian stopped, a little girl in white appeared in front of him. The little girl in white looked at Yi Xian and grinned. This smile was somewhat sinister. Immediately after, she was about to make a move, but at this moment, Yi Xian suddenly took out a candied hawthorn. The little girl looked at the candied hawthorn in Yi Xian's hand and blinked. Yi Xian flicked his finger, and the candied hawthorn landed in front of the little girl in white. The white-clothed little girl hesitated for a moment, and then she took the candied fruit and licked it lightly. In next to no time, her eyes lit up with disbelief. Yi Xian heaved a sigh of relief. Actually, he was just trying it out because he realized that some of the younger ones seemed to like Tong Hulu. Obviously, the little girl in front of him also liked Tong Hulu. The little girl in white was indeed attracted by the candied hawthorn. She licked with relish. Yi Xian sized up the little girl in white. This little girl's strength was not an ordinary kind of ferocious. Because just now, this little girl had forcefully taken a blow from his sword, and was completely fine. Soon, the little girl finished eating the candied haws. Yi Xian quickly took out another stick of candied hawthorn, and handed it to the little girl. The little girl in white looked at Yi Xian. She took the candied hawthorn but did not say anything. Yi Xian smiled and asked, "What's your name?" The white-clothed little girl didn't say anything. Yi Xian took out a stick of candied hawthorn and gave it to the white-clothed girl. The white-clothed girl took it and said, "Nagalu." "Nagalu?" Yi Xian frowned slightly. That name is a little strange. The white-clothed little girl looked at Yi Xian and didn't say anything. Yi Xian smiled and said, "Nagalu, what are you doing here?" Nagalu didn't answer, and just licked the candied hawthorn. Yi Xian hesitated for a moment and said, "Do you want to go out and play?" Nagalu looked at Yi Xian and said, "I can't go out." Yi Xian was slightly puzzled. "Why? I can even go out." Nagalu pointed to the right. Yi Xian looked over, but there was nothing there. Meanwhile, Nagalu suddenly walked over. The space in front of Nagalu suddenly split open a few hundred meters away, and then a huge golden word floated out. "Stop." The golden word "stop" blocked Nagala's path, and there was fear in Nagala's eyes. Yi Xian looked at the word and said in a low voice, "Jiming, do you know what this is?" Yi Jiming was silent for a moment then said, "I've never seen it before." Yi Xian walked over to Nagala's side and looked at the golden word. It was obvious that someone had trapped Nagalu here. Who could it be? A single word had trapped the powerful Nagalu here. Yi Xian was silent for a moment. Then he looked at Nagalu and said, "Why don't you enter my Xiaota?" Nagalu pointed at Yi Xian's abdomen. Inside, Yi Xian nodded. Nagalu fell silent. Yi Xian smiled and said, "Give it a try? What if I can get out?" Nagalu thought about it, then nodded and entered the prison pagoda. Inside the pagoda, Nagalu looked around curiously. Outside, Yi Xian looked at the giant golden word. He walked forward slowly. At this moment, the giant golden word suddenly erupted with a beam of golden light. Yi Xian's expression changed drastically, and he slashed with his sword. Hiss! A tearing sound resounded. Bang! An expanse of sword light suddenly erupted in the dark realm. In the next moment, Yi Xian was instantly blasted back 30 kilometers away. After he stopped, Yi Xian's expression was extremely solemn. He looked at the golden word. What the hell is this? Suddenly, the golden word trembled violently, as if it was about to attack again. Yi Xian's expression changed drastically, and he suddenly leaped up and stabbed with his sword. The sword of the way. As he stabbed with his sword, the remaining turbid qi in the surroundings was instantly reduced to nothingness. The sword is the way is the sword. This was the first time Yi Xian had used the sword of the way. At this moment, the golden word suddenly transformed into a ray of golden light and vanished. A moment of silence. Bang! An expanse of golden light and sword light suddenly erupted in this expanse of space. And then a figure retreated repeatedly amidst the sword light and golden light. It was Yi Xian. This time, Yi Xian had retreated by an entire 30 kilometers. However, the golden word had retreated by 3 kilometers as well. Yi Xian had just stopped moving when the space behind him exploded apart, and he even spat out a few mouthfuls of blood essence. Yi Xian wiped off the blood on the corners of his mouth, and then he gazed at the golden word. What the hell is this? It's actually so terrifying. If his physical body wasn't sufficiently strong, then he would have probably been obliterated by that attack. Meanwhile, Nagalu appeared by Yi Xian's side. She gazed at Yi Xian in silence. Yi Xian laughed bitterly. I can't defeat him. Nagalu turned around and left. Yi Xian hesitated for a moment, and then he followed her. Along the way, Nagalu didn't speak. Yi Xian smiled. Nagalu, how long have you been here? Nagalu raised a finger. Yi Xian blinked. 10,000 years? Nagalu looked at Yi Xian. 100,000 years. 100,000 years. Yi Xian was stunned. She had been here for 100,000 years. What the hell? This little girl had lived for 100,000 years? At this time, Nagalu stopped, and Yi Xian looked up. Not far away, there was a floating mountain. This mountain was 100,000 zhang tall, and there were some scattered floating rocks around it. Yi Xian followed Nagalu to the top of the mountain. When they arrived, Yi Xian saw an old man. The old man sat cross-legged on a boulder. His long hair draped over his shoulders, and his aura was as deep as the sea. Yi Xian's expression turned solemn. There was a powerhouse here. At this time, Nagalu walked to the old man's side, and she handed the candied hawthorn in her hand to the old man. The old man opened his eyes, glanced at the candied hawthorn in Nagalu's hand and smiled. You eat. Nagalu shook her head. The old man smiled, took the candied hawthorn, and then looked at Yi Xian in the distance, smiling. Taoist body. How many years has it been since I last saw it? Taoist body. Hearing this, Yi Xian's expression suddenly became extremely solemn. Taoist body was a part of the Taoist scripture martial arts. And in the words of Knowing Destiny, there were only 2 people who knew about the Taoist scripture martial arts. One was the owner of the Taoist scripture, and the other was her. This old man in front of him actually knew about Taoist body. Could it be the owner of the Taoist scripture? But it didn't seem like it. Yi Xian's mind was full of questions. At this time the old man smiled. Young man, do you have many questions? Yi Xian nodded. How does Senior know about Taoist body? The old man smiled. Because someone has successfully cultivated it. Yi Xian asked. Who? The old man said softly. It was a very, very long time ago. Yi Xian glanced at the old man. Who are you, Senior? The old man looked at Yi Xian. Young man, do you believe in fate? Yi Xian was silent. Damn, this old man is trying to fool me. The old man smiled. I believe in fate, and to be able to meet you today, it is enough to prove that we are fated. Yi Xian smiled. With Senior's strength, you should be able to see the cause of my misfortune, right? The old man was silent. Yi Xian said, Senior, if there is anything you want to say, you can say it directly. The old man said softly, Young man, you are a straightforward person, so I will say it directly. To be honest, I want you to do me a favor. Yi Xian did not say anything. He did not dare to casually agree to someone else's request. This old man was unfathomable, and the other party was actually trapped here. One could imagine how strong the person who trapped them was. The old man looked at Yi Xian. Young man, can you help me bring my granddaughter out? Jialu. Yi Xian looked at Jialu. Jialu licked his tongue hulu, and did not say anything. The old man said again. Young man, over the years, there have been some people who have come here, but I did not ask them for help. I did not intend to ask you for help, because the karma between my granddaughter and me is not something an ordinary person can bear. Yi Xian frowned. You think I can bear it? The old man looked at Yi Xian. You have the cause of misfortune, but you still lived until now. Young man, do you know how terrifying that is? Yi Xian was silent. The old man said again, Young man, I do not know your background, but I know that it is not simple. Yi Xian looked at Jiao Lu and said with a smile, Senior, the person who can trap you must have strength that I cannot resist, right? The old man nodded. It is not someone you can resist. However, this is a grudge between me and him. My granddaughter is innocent, so I want to ask you for a favor and bring her out. Yi Xian did not say anything. The old man looked at Yi Xian. I do not have any benefits for you. On the contrary, if you save my granddaughter, it is very likely that you will be tainted with some bad karma. And this karma will bring you great trouble in the future. Yi Xian said with a smile. Then senior, do you think I will save her? The old man said with a smile. You will. Yi Xian did not understand. Why? The old man smiled slightly. Because you are a good person. Yi Xian was struck dumb. Then he shook his head. Sir, I have a lot of friends behind me. Anything I say or do can bring disaster to them. So, do you understand what I mean? The old man was silent. Yi Xian said, If I am alone, I will save her, but I have a universe behind me, so I am sorry. After saying that, he turned around and left. Be a good person? He really did not mind doing good things. But the premise was that he had the strength. Taking care of things that were not within one's ability would not only bring disaster to oneself, but also to the entire five-dimensional universe. Doing good things, he had to act within his ability. If he did not have the ability, then he really should not meddle in other people's business. Moreover, he did not know the ins and outs of the matter. Who knew whether this old man deserved it or not? The Virtuous Swordsman. Chapter 1391. The old man sighed softly when he saw Yi Xian leave decisively. Yi Xian still didn't stop. At this moment, the old man suddenly appeared before Yi Xian. Yi Xian held the sword tightly in his right hand and didn't speak, but he was secretly on guard. The old man smiled. Young friend, perhaps we can talk in a different way. Yi Xian looked at the old man. Feel free to bluff me, senior. The old man laughed. Young friend, you're interesting. Yi Xian didn't speak. The old man sized up Yi Xian and smiled. Young friend, I saw that your Dao form has just reached the Dao validation realm, right? Yi Xian nodded. Yes. The old man smiled. Do you want to reach the Dao defense realm? The Dao defense realm. Yi Xian was stunned, and then he said, Are you serious? The old man nodded. Yes. Yi Xian fell silent. The old man continued. Young friend, there will be trouble if you save my granddaughter. But this trouble is in the future. Since it's in the future, then there are many uncertain factors. At that time, it might seem troublesome now, but it might be a trivial matter to you. To put it simply, whether the trouble in the future is big or small, or no trouble at all, it all depends on your strength in the future. New Yi Xian looked at the old man in confusion. Who are you people? The old man smiled. The dragon horde, the most ancient dragon horde. Dragon? Yi Xian couldn't help but glance at Jialo in the distance. No wonder this little girl's defense is so abnormal. So it's a dragon. The old man continued. Young friend, if you're willing to help, this old man can not only help you reach the Dao defense realm, but he can also pass on everything to you from the dragon horde. Of course, this old man won't bluff you. Forming good karma with the dragon horde is equivalent to forming bad karma with others. However, little friends should also understand that since ancient times, fortune and misfortune come hand in hand. There are gains and losses. It all depends on little friend's choice. Yi Xian looked at the old man. Didn't you say that you wouldn't give me any benefits? The old man smiled and said, It's just a test. Yi Xian asked, What's there to test? Do you think I'm a good person? The old man smiled and said, Little friend, you are neither good nor evil. You are not a pure good person, nor are you a pure evil person. After a moment of silence, Yi Xian asked, "What level has Senior reached?" The old man thought for a moment and said, "Do you really want to know?" Yi Xian nodded. The old man smiled and said, 2 or 3 realms higher than you, little friend. Above achieving the Tao. Yi Xian asked softly, "Senior, what is above achieving Tao?" The old man smiled and said, "You will know in the future." Yi Xian was speechless. "Can't I know in advance?" The old man shook his head. "It's meaningless. Don't ask about meaningless things." Yi Xian was about to speak when the old man said, "Little friend, let me discuss my specific conditions with you. If you are willing to help, then not only will I help your Tao body attain the Tao defense realm, I will even give you the wealth of the Jiaolong tribe. Moreover, the Jiaolong tribe has 12 dragon souls. Even though they are only souls, they are all at the peak of the Tao defense realm. Moreover, they are not ordinary peak Tao defense realm experts. Ordinary experts at the Tao defense realm are utterly unable to resist them. 12 dragon souls, all at the peak of the Tao defense realm." Yi Xian was slightly tempted. At this time, the old man added, "As for wealth, all the top-grade mines in the heavenly world abyss belong to my dragon tribe. As long as little friend agrees, I will gift all the top-grade mines to little friend, as well as some of my dragon tribe's treasures. Everything will belong to little friend." Yi Xian hesitated for a moment before he said, "Senior, this," the old man continued. "There are over 30 top-grade spirit veins in the depths of the dark world, and every single one of them contains at least 1,000,000 divine fortune crystals." Yi Xian suddenly said seriously, "I'll do it." The old man looked at Yi Xian. "Won't you think about it?" Yi Xian hurriedly shook his head. "There's no need to think about it." The old man smiled. "You know how strong I am. Just think about it. How terrifying is the person who can trap me? Are you really not going to think about it?" Yi Xian chuckled. "I really want to think about the future. However, my top priority now is to think about the present." Would the doubting let him go? Of course not. As for the Tao tomb, he would not place his hopes on it at all. As long as there were enough benefits, the Tao tomb would abandon him at any time. As if thinking of something, Yi Xian said solemnly, "Senior, there's a large golden word outside." The old man smiled. "I'll take care of that." Yi Xian nodded. "Then there's no problem." The old man said, "Come with me." After saying that, he walked into the distance. Yi Xian and Jialo followed. Soon, the old man brought Yi Xian and Jialo to a well. Yi Xian glanced at the well. It was not water in the well, but blood. It was full of blood. The blood was boiling like magma. The old man said softly, "When my dragon horde was massacred, I preserved the blood of my dragon horde." After saying that, he looked at Yi Xian. "Go down." Yi Xian said solemnly, "Absorb." The old man smiled. "No, go down and use the dragon blood to temper your body. My dragon horde's blood is extremely young and tyrannical. It has a miraculous effect on the tempering of the body. This much dragon blood is enough to improve your Taoist physique to the next level. Not only that, but it will also give you the power of the dragon blood." Yi Xian glanced at the dragon blood and jumped into the well without hesitation. Boom. In an instant, Yi Xian's eyes widened. Burn. At this moment, Yi Xian felt his body burning. The power of the dragon blood. This well contained almost all the dragon blood of the Jia dragon horde. This dragon blood was so powerful that ordinary Tao defense realm cultivators would immediately be reduced to ashes if they entered. Only Yi Xian's Taoist physique could withstand the power of so much dragon blood. If it was an ordinary person, they would probably be burned to ashes the moment they came into contact with the dragon blood. At this moment, the blood in Yi Xian's body suddenly surged. Boom. In an instant, Yi Xian began to absorb the dragon blood around him. He was devouring. The old man watched quietly from the side. He did not stop him, and his expression was calm, as if he had already expected this. Beside the old man, Jello was still quietly licking his candied fruit, not saying a word. Meanwhile, the old man suddenly grabbed Jello's hand and spoke softly. "Little girl, follow him later, all right?" Jello shook her head. The old man looked at Jello and smiled. Little girl, you're the last hope of the dragon horde. Grandpa didn't want you to carry this burden, but you have no choice. Look at the dragon horde. 136 dragons were skinned and their tendons skinned. We living dragons can't forget this blood feud. Grandpa isn't capable enough to avenge our clansmen. Only you can avenge them. Giallo remained silent. The old man looked at the well and spoke softly. You must follow him. Only by following him will you have a chance to avenge the dragon horde. Besides that, little girl, it's time for you to go out and see the outside world. Giallo still remained silent. The old man looked at Yi Xian in the well. This person has the disaster seed and has cultivated a Dao body. He's not simple, especially his bloodline power. His bloodline power is even stronger than our Jia dragon tribes. I have to say that it's terrifying for a human's bloodline to reach such a level. However, because of the disaster seed, his troubles may be endless. Little girl, you must be careful when you follow him. Just because he's tough doesn't mean the lives of those around him are tough. Giallo still remained silent. The old man looked at Giallo with a complicated expression. Little girl, if you can take revenge in the future, do so. If you can't, then don't. Remember, staying alive is the most important thing. You must live well. Giallo looked at the old man. Let's go together. The old man smiled and was about to speak when the well in the distance suddenly exploded, and Yi Xian floated out. At that moment, Yi Xian's body exuded an extremely powerful aura. His body was red, as if it was condensed from fresh blood. Dragon blood. He had absorbed all the dragon blood. Now his Dao body had reached the Dao Imperial realm. Yi Xian opened his eyes and clenched his fists. In an instant, the space around him split apart. A trace of excitement flashed in Yi Xian's eyes. After he had devoured the dragon blood, his Dao body had not only reached the Dao Imperial realm, but he had also obtained the bloodline power of the dragon tribe. The characteristic of the bloodline power of the dragon tribe was power. Unparalleled power. He could now easily kill a Dao Imperial realm expert with the power of his physical body. With the strength of his current physical body, he would not be afraid, even if he faced experts at the level of Zhenwu and White Robe. He could go head-on against experts at the level of White Robe and Zhenwu. The improvement this time was far too great. Yi Xian withdrew his thoughts and looked at the old man in the distance. He cupped his fists and said, "Thank you." The old man smiled and said, "Congratulations, young friend." Yi Xian spoke in a low voice. "Senior, was this heaven abyss once the territory of the dragon tribe?" The old man nodded. This place used to be the territory of the dragon tribe. Later on, a great battle occurred here, so it became an abyss. The mineral veins in this abyss all belong to the dragon tribe. Yi Xian spoke softly. "I see." Meanwhile, the old man withdrew a spatial ring. This spatial ring contains all the treasures and mineral veins of the dragon tribe. It can be said that all the wealth of the dragon tribe is in here. Now I'll give it to you. However, Yi Xian did not take it. The old man smiled. "Young friend, are you going back on your word?" Yi Xian spoke in a low voice. "Senior, aren't you afraid of entrusting it to the wrong person?" The old man roared with laughter. "Young friend, I believe in your character." Yi Xian shook his head and smiled. "To be honest, even I don't really believe in my character." The old man smiled. "Young friend, I'll be honest with you as well. Besides you, I have no one else to choose from." Yi Xian fell silent. The old man looked at Jia Lu, who was beside him. "Young friend, this granddaughter of mine has been here for too long and is slightly introverted. However, her nature is not bad. After she leaves with you, I hope you treat her well." Yi Xian glanced at Jia Lu. "Don't worry, senior. I, Yi Xian, will take good care of Miss Jia Lu after I've benefited from you." The old man spoke softly. This old man can rest assured. As he spoke, he spread open his hands. In an instant, his body started to crack inch by inch. At the same time, an extremely overbearing aura suddenly appeared on the mountain peak. In next to no time, an enormous dragon that was over 100 kilometers long appeared on the mountain peak. In front of this enormous dragon, the mountain beneath Yi Xian's feet was like a speck of dust. Yi Xian was shocked. He had never seen such an enormous dragon before. Compared to this dragon, the so-called true dragons in the past were like earthworms. At this moment, the enormous dragon suddenly raised its head and roared angrily. In an instant, the entire celestial abyss shook violently. At this moment, whether it was the doubting world or the Tao tomb, everyone was shocked. In the sky above the mountain peak, the enormous dragon raised its head and looked into the distance, laughing loudly. Girl, remember well. Even if there is only one dragon left in my dragon clan, we must still live with our backs straight. We can die, we can be exterminated, but our dragon clan's courage and pride cannot be lost. Even if we die, we must die standing. Is that so? At this moment, an ancient voice suddenly sounded from afar. This voice seemed to come from ancient times, and it was illusory. At almost the same time, somewhere in the distant starry sky, a woman in a plain dress suddenly stopped in her tracks. The woman in the plain dress just stood there silently, not saying a word. As the ancient voice sounded from the depths of the celestial abyss, a huge golden word suddenly appeared before the enormous dragon, and a faint shadow could be seen within the golden word. The golden word transformed into a golden ray of light that shot explosively towards the enormous dragon. In the sky, the enormous dragon suddenly raised its head and roared, and then it directly collided with the golden ray of light. Boom! This collision caused the entire celestial abyss to shake violently like a huge earthquake. In the sky, the enormous dragon had just come into contact with the golden word, and then the enormous dragon actually started to crumble inch by inch. When he saw this, Yi Xian's expression instantly changed. Such a powerful dragon actually couldn't defeat this word? Yi Xian was extremely shocked. At this moment, the old man's pained voice suddenly resounded in the sky. Take her and leave. Yi Xian didn't waste any time, and he directly pulled Jialo, who was beside him, and ran madly towards the distance. At this moment, the enormous dragon had already turned into ashes. A super expert above the Tao attainment realm had been instantly killed just like that. His soul had been completely destroyed. Yi Xian was extremely shocked. Damn, this was too frightening. Hurry up and run. Yi Xian pulled Jialo and quickened their pace. At this moment, Yi Xian and Jialo suddenly stopped, because the huge golden word had appeared in front of them. Within the huge golden word, a faint shadow could be seen. Yi Xian looked at this shadow with an extremely solemn expression. Beside Yi Xian, Jialo stared at the shadow. 2 streams of clear liquid had appeared on her cheeks, and her eyes were filled with undisguised killing intent. The huge golden word suddenly trembled slightly, as if it was about to attack. At this moment, somewhere in the distant starry sky, the woman in the plain dress suddenly turned her head and glanced at it. Attack him? You can try. P.S. Tickets. Chapter 1392. As soon as she said this, the golden word in front of Yi Xian and Jialo stopped moving. Yi Xian was stunned. The woman in the plain dress continued to walk into the distance. At this moment, a voice resounded from the starry sky behind her. Who are you? In the distance, the woman in the plain dress didn't even turn around. Someone you can't afford to offend. Someone you can't afford to offend. The starry sky suddenly became quiet. Heaven, abyss, dark world. The golden word in front of Yi Xian suddenly became illusory, and then it gradually disappeared completely. Yi Xian and Jialo were stunned. Gone. Yi Xian lifted his head to take a look. He said softly, Is that you, Qing'e? There was no response. Yi Xian was silent for a moment, and then he left with Jialo. Jialo didn't speak along the way. Yi Xian glanced at Jialo and said, Miss Jialo, why don't you come to my tower first? Jialo nodded and disappeared on the spot. Yi Xian looked around. He had to admit that he had gained a lot this time. Very much. The treasures he had obtained from the Naga Dragon clan were enough to change the fate of the entire 5th dimension. Truly changed the fate of the 5th dimension. There were a total of 36 top-grade mineral veins in the spatial ring the old man had given him. In addition to the ones he had obtained before, he now had a total of 40 top-grade mineral veins. And he had tens of millions of divine fortune crystals. Tens of millions. What did that mean? It could be said that the total wealth of the doubting and the Dao tomb couldn't compare to Yi Xian. With these divine fortune crystals, he could cultivate a large number of Dao-proving realm experts, and even Dao-controlling realm experts. Of course, what he needed the most now was time. The complete rise of the fifth dimension was only a matter of time. Apart from that, he had also gained a lot this time. He now had over 100,000 energy swords, and all of them were condensed from turbid qi. Even an ordinary Dao defense realm expert would find it difficult to resist the turbid qi. This was the gift he had prepared for the doubting. Of course, the biggest gain was the improvement of his Taoist body. With his current body, he could fight against a top expert like true martial god. It could be said that if it was a one-on-one battle, the only ones who could pose a fatal threat to him were experts of the Dao realm. In addition, he had also obtained the treasures of the Naga dragons. The treasures of the dragon clan were truly terrifying. In short, the harvest this time was bountiful. Of course, he didn't get too excited. Now he had to face a problem, and that was how to explain everything that had happened in the dark world. However, this was not a problem for him. After a while, Yi Xian left the black vortex. As soon as he appeared outside the vortex, Rahu and the others appeared in front of him. Luoho glanced at Yi Xian. Let's talk somewhere else. After saying that, everyone disappeared. Heavenly King Palace. Apart from Luoho, Qi Yaoyao, Bitter King and Barbarian King were also in the hall. At this moment, everyone was looking at Yi Xian. Yi Xian smiled. Everyone must be very curious about what happened in the vortex. Luoho nodded. Tell us. Yi Xian told them about the sword sect, but he didn't say anything about Jialo and the old man. In any case, it was half the truth and half a lie. After a while, Luoho suddenly asked, "That's it?" Yi Xian nodded. "That's it." Luoho looked at Yi Xian. "You didn't know that something big happened in the dark world?" Yi Xian said, "I know, but it came from the depths of the dark world. I didn't go there, so I don't know what happened there either." At this moment, Bitter King suddenly said, "You really don't know, or you don't want to say?" Yi Xian looked at Bitter King and smiled. "Bitter King, you really think highly of me. How could I go to the depths of the dark world?" Bitter King gazed at Yi Xian and didn't speak. Meanwhile, Luoho suddenly said, "Did you get anything?" Yi Xian nodded. "I brought 6 top-grade ores from the Sword Sect ruins." As soon as he finished speaking, he withdrew a spatial ring and passed it to Luoho. "I'll take 3. Luoho glanced at Yi Xian and put the spatial ring away. Meanwhile, Zhan Man spoke abruptly. "What right do you have to take 3? Yi Xian replied, "I risked my life for them." Zhan Man gazed at Yi Xian. "Without us to stop the doubting, you wouldn't have been able to enter." Yi Xian ignored Zhan Man and looked at Luoho instead. Luoho remained silent. Yi Xian smiled. "It's fine. They're all yours. I don't want any of them." As soon as he finished speaking, he placed a spatial ring in front of Luoho. Inside the spatial ring were 3 top-grade ores. After putting down the spatial ring, Yi Xian turned around and left. Zhan Man King frowned. "Wait." Yi Xian turned around to look at Zhan Man King. Zhan Man King stared at Yi Xian. "I suspect there are more than 6. Yi Xian laughed. "Zhan Man King, are you an idiot?" Zhan Man King narrowed his eyes and punched out. In the distance, Yi Xian slashed down with his sword. Bang! An explosion suddenly resounded in the hall. Yi Xian retreated a dozen steps while Zhan Man King returned to his original position. Luoho and Bitter King looked at Yi Xian with a trace of shock in their eyes. Yi Xian's strength has become so strong? Qing Yaoyao sipped her tea slowly and didn't speak at all. Zhan Man King was about to attack again when Yi Xian suddenly said, "Zhan Man King, you can attack if you want, but it's pointless to stop now. How about this? I challenge you to a life and death duel. And I won't stop until one of us dies. Just the 2 of us. And we'll have a fair fight. The one who asks for help is a dog. What do you think?" Luoho frowned as well. Zhan Man King gazed at Yi Xian and smiled. "Do you think I'm afraid of you? You." Meanwhile, Qing Yaoyao spoke abruptly. "Zhan Man, do you want to die?" Everyone gazed at Qing Yaoyao when they heard this. Zhan Man gazed at her with a gloomy expression. What are you trying to say? Qing Yaoyao shrugged. Then have a life-and-death duel. Zhan Man King frowned. Divine King, do you think I can't defeat him? Qing Yaoyao smiled. Zhan Man, let's not talk about whether you can defeat him or not. Let's talk about whether your life-and-death duel is meaningful. Who would be the happiest if the two of you fought to the death? Doubting. As she spoke, she gazed at Yi Xian. Don't you think so? Yi Xian said with a smile. But I still want to fight him. Qing Yaoyao gazed at Yi Xian. Are you sure? She was slightly displeased. Yi Xian looked Qing Yaoyao in the eyes. I'm sure. As soon as these words were spoken, the temperature in the surroundings suddenly dropped. Meanwhile, Zhan Man King stood up, but Luo Ho stopped him. Zhan Man King was about to speak when Luo Ho's voice suddenly resounded in his mind. You have to think this through. He's full of tricks, and never does anything that puts him at a disadvantage. Moreover, he's ruthless. He definitely has something to rely on since he dared to challenge you. And it's very likely that even we can't stop him. Even if we can stop him, your entire reputation will be destroyed if you lose to him. Zhan Man King fell silent. At this moment, Qian Yaoyao suddenly opened her palm, and a storage ring flew into her hand in front of Luo Ho. She handed the storage ring to Yi Xian. You deserve this. Yi Xian put the spatial ring away, turned around and left. After Yi Xian left, Zhan Man King said fiercely, He's too arrogant. If it wasn't for our Dao tomb, he would have already been Daoing. Idiot. Qi Yaoyao suddenly turned around and glanced coldly at Zhan Man. Zhan Man King's expression instantly turned ferocious, and he was just about to stand up when Luo Ho suddenly said, Sit down. His voice was icy cold, and it didn't contain a trace of emotion. Zhan Man King said in a low voice, Luo Ho, are you really going to let him do this? Luo Ho looked at Qing Yaoyao. Speak. Qing Yaoyao sat down with an expressionless face. We've always taken the initiative in our cooperation with him, but I'm afraid that's no longer the case now. Luo Ho frowned. What do you mean? Qing Yaoyao said softly, Let me ask everyone a question. Does he really need our Dao tomb? Zhan Man King said coldly, Doesn't he need it? Qing Yaoyao looked at Zhan Man. Can you use your brain a little? Zhan Man King said angrily. You. Luo Ho suddenly said, If you interrupt again, get out. In the Dao tomb, Qi Yaoyao had always been the brains of the Dao tomb. Even when the Lord was here, he was extremely respectful to Qi Yaoyao, and would discuss all major matters with her. Zhan Man King's expression was a little ugly, but he didn't interrupt again. Qi Yaoyao said, Actually, he doesn't need us. I've investigated before. He went to doubting after Mu Ninian's death, and he slaughtered countless doubting experts at that time. He even proved his Dao by killing. In the end, the Dao ancestor had no choice but to intervene, but he's still alive. Why? Because his younger sister stopped the Dao ancestor. In other words, Yi Ling. And there's an extremely powerful soul within Yi Ling's body. Luo Ho and the others fell silent. Qi Yaoyao said again, What does that mean? It means that that person's strength isn't inferior to the Dao ancestors. Also, you seem to have forgotten that he's someone with the Calamity Seed. This Calamity Seed only exists in the legends. Of course, that's not the point. The point is that he's still alive. As she spoke, she glanced at the crowd. I've done an investigation recently, and I've investigated everything about him. Do you know what I found? Luo Ho said solemnly, Speak. Qi Yaoyao smiled. He's not someone we can afford to offend. Luo Ho frowned slightly. A little exaggerated? Qi Yaoyao shook her head. It's not exaggerated at all. We all think that Mu Ninian is his greatest backer. But in my opinion, that Miss Nian isn't his greatest backer. The source of his bloodline is that woman in a plain dress. And we know almost nothing about these two people. Even with our strength, we can't investigate them. If you think about this problem, you'll realize how terrifying it is. Besides that, there's definitely someone who's helping him resist the Calamity Seed. Otherwise, with his strength, he would absolutely be unable to survive until now. As for this cause of disaster, let alone resisting it, we don't even know what the hell this cause of disaster is. The Calamity Seed, What exactly is it? Actually, many people don't know. They only know that it's a form of karma. But exactly what kind of karma is it? No one knows. Qi Yaoyao continued. He's immune to sword qi. As for the sword sex sword qi, all of you've experienced it, so you know how terrifying it is. But he's immune to it. As she spoke, she looked at John Man. If I were him, I wouldn't absorb the sword qi. Instead, I'd gather it, and once I encounter an enemy, I'd release it. In any case, the sword qi would automatically attack others. How comfortable would that be? Jean Man's expression turned even more unsightly when he heard this. Chapter 1393. Inside the hall, Luo Ho and the others had ugly expressions. Qi Yaoyao stood up and left without another word. In the starry sky, Yi Xian suddenly stopped with a woman standing in front of him. It was Qing Yaoyao. Qing Yaoyao looked at Yi Xian and smiled. This isn't like you. Yi Xian said, about the hall? Qing Yaoyao nodded. Yi Xian smiled. Miss Yaoyao, the Dao Tomb grounds have never trusted me. No matter how many top-grade ores I hand over, you still won't believe me, right? Qing Yaoyao fell silent. Indeed, no matter how much Yi Xian handed over, the Dao Tomb grounds would think it wasn't enough. Qing Yaoyao looked at Yi Xian and smiled. Then how many top-grade ores did you get? Yi Xian looked at Qing Yaoyao. Miss Yaoyao, are you asking me on behalf of the Dao Tomb grounds or yourself? Qing Yaoyao blinked. Is there a difference? Yi Xian smiled. There's a huge difference. How could Qing Yaoyao not understand Yi Xian's meaning? After a moment of silence, Qing Yaoyao said, I won't ask any more. Yi Xian smiled. Farewell. With that, he turned to leave. At this moment, Qing Yaoyao suddenly said, Can I still kill you now? Yi Xian stopped and looked at Qing Yaoyao. I'm afraid not. He couldn't. Qing Yaoyao shook her head and smiled. She knew that Yi Xian must have had some fortuitous encounter in the dark world. Qi Yaoyao asked again, Then can you kill me? Yi Xian thought about it. I can try. Qing Yaoyao looked at Yi Xian. You're so confident? Yi Xian smiled. I'm not very confident. Qing Yaoyao's lips curled. Want to exchange a few moves? Yi Xian shook his head. Miss Yaoyao, my enemy is doubting not you, and not the Dao Tomb. From the very beginning, I've never treated the Dao Tomb as an enemy. You should know this very well. However, the Dao Tomb doesn't think so. What do you think? After a long period of silence, Qing Yaoyao asked, Will we become enemies in the future? Yi Xian smiled and said, That will depend on what the Dao Tomb ground does. Qing Yaoyao looked at Yi Xian without saying anything. Yi Xian suddenly smiled and said, Miss Yaoyao, have you ever thought of changing places? Qin Yaoyao was taken aback for a moment before she smiled and said, You want to rope me in? Yi Xian nodded. The fifth dimension is a good place. Are you interested in going there? Qin Yaoyao smiled and said, I'm very curious. What benefits are you going to use to win me over? Yi Xian pondered for a moment before he asked, What does Miss Yaoyao want? Qin Yaoyao asked back, What do you think I want? Yi Xian looked at Qin Yaoyao and said, You want to destroy the doubting, the so-called Great Tao, because the Great Tao is unfair. But now, the Dao Tomb ground's goal is not doubting. Miss Yaoyao, forgive me for being blunt, but even if the Dao Tomb ground destroys the doubting, the world will still be unfair because the Dao Tomb ground will be the next doubting. Miss Yaoyao, you should understand that the Dao Tomb ground is no longer fighting for their beliefs, but for themselves. Qin Yaoyao was silent. Yi Xian said again, Miss Yaoyao, you should have investigated the fifth dimension. What do you think of it now? Qin Yaoyao smiled and said, Very good. Yi Xian looked at Qin Yaoyao and said, I want to destroy the doubting and rebuild the great Tao of order. Qin Yaoyao looked straight at Yi Xian and said, Will you not become the next doubting? Yi Xian shook his head and said, I won't. Qin Yaoyao smiled and said, Why should I? Yi Xian smiled and said, Miss Yaoyao, you understand. With that he turned and left. Qin Yaoyao was silent. She naturally understood. Why did Yi Xian want to destroy the doubting? Revenge. Revenge for Mu Nianyan. What was Yi Xian's ultimate goal? To protect the fifth dimension. Yi Xian didn't care about the Tao scripture. power, or longevity. Or in other words, in his heart, the Tao scripture, power, longevity, and invincibility were not the most important. To him, friends, family, and the fifth dimension were more important. Yi Xian always knew what he wanted to do, and what he wanted to fight for. But the Tao tomb ground was no longer fighting for the beliefs of the past. What did the Tao breakers in the Tao tomb ground believe in? Fairness. Why did they resist the doubting? Because the great Tao was unfair. However, when they had great strength, would they fight for this so-called fairness for more people? No. Because there was no difference between them and the doubting itself. Everyone was fighting for themselves. This was why no one in the Tao tomb ground was able to forge a new path. In the past, the doubting was about proving one's Tao, while the Tao tomb ground was about breaking one's Tao. But now, above breaking one's Tao was controlling one's Tao and achieving one's Tao. In other words, the Tao tomb ground and the doubting path were the same. With this thought, Qian Yaoyao sighed and turned to leave. Doubting. In the main hall of the Divine Palace, Bai Dizzy and the others had ugly expressions on their faces. In the dark world, White Robe did not attack Yi Xian, because he discovered that Yi Xian could ignore the turbid qi. Moreover, such a huge commotion in the dark world was definitely related to Yi Xian. What happened in the dark world? This was what they wanted to know the most. At this moment, Bai Dizzy said softly, "Things are getting worse for us." They really wanted to kill Yi Xian, and used all their strength. But Yi Xian was still alive and well. Now, Yi Xian was growing every day, and they could only watch Yi Xian grow. It had to be said that this was a kind of torture for them. And now, even if they wanted to stop and make peace, it was impossible because Yi Xian would never stop and make peace. It could be said that between the doubting and Yi Xian, only one could survive. At this moment, Bai Dizzy suddenly said, "Wait." White Robe and the true martial divine lord looked at Bai Dizzy, and Bai Dizzy slowly closed his eyes. Wait for the Tao ancestor to come out of seclusion. Come out of seclusion. Now, only when the Tao ancestor came out could they change the situation of the doubting. In the fifth dimension, after Yi Xian returned to the fifth dimension, he immediately called Guan Yin. In the hall, Yi Xian said solemnly, "Only Shaoqi has reached Tao validation?" Guan Yin nodded. And Lanxiu, Arrow, and a Jiu are on the verge of breaking through. But it's still not enough. There aren't enough Fortune Divine Crystals. Fortune Divine Crystals. Thinking of this, Guan Yin sighed softly. At this moment, she realized how important the Fortune Divine Crystals were. Not only were they useful to Tao validation experts, but they were also useful to self-release experts like her. This world was like this. Without money, no matter how much effort you put in, it was useless. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly took out a storage ring and handed it to Guan Yin. Guan Yin glanced at the storage ring, and the next moment, her expression changed drastically. There were 5 million Fortune Divine Crystals in the storage ring. Moreover, these Fortune Divine Crystals were several times purer than before. Guan Yin looked at Yi Xian and said with a trembling voice, "Where did you go to rob this time?" Yi Xian's face darkened. "What are you saying? What do you mean I went to rob again?" Guan Yin stared at Yi Xian. "Where did you get them?" Yi Xian said with a smile. "It's a long story, so I won't say much. You can distribute these Fortune Divine Crystals." Guan Yin glanced at Yi Xian and did not ask any more. She picked up the storage ring and left. In the hall, Yi Xian slowly closed his eyes. Fortune Divine Crystals. He now had more than 38 million Fortune Divine Crystals. After giving 5 million to Guan Yin, he still had 33 million left. These Fortune Divine Crystals were enough to last the fifth dimension for 100 years. What he needed the most now was time. It could be said that it was not impossible for the fifth dimension to surpass the doubting and the Tao tomb. Inside the hall, Yi Xian took out the Tao scriptures. He now had 5 Tao scriptures. He already knew that there was one in the doubting, one in the Tao tomb, and one in the whirling world. What about the last one? Yi Xian suddenly asked. "Jiming, do you know the whereabouts of the last Tao scripture?" Yi Jiming said solemnly, "No." Yi Xian slowly closed his eyes. Tao scriptures. The spirit of the great Tao. This was what Sister Nian told him before she died. He must find the spirit of the great Tao. At this moment, Guanyin suddenly ran into the hall. She looked at Yi Xian and said excitedly, "Good news." Yi Xian was stunned and asked, "Good news?" Guanyin nodded and said excitedly, Many spirits came." Spirits. Yi Xian and Guanyin disappeared from the hall. Spirit Palace. On this day, countless spirits came to the Spirit Palace. These spirits were the spirits of heaven and earth that had been ordered by Xiaolinger to find spirits. Now these spirits had returned. Not only did they return, but they also brought many spirits with them to the fifth dimension. Every spirit brought back a spirit. Some even brought back a few. For a moment, the entire Spirit Palace became unusually lively. Yi Xian glanced at the entire Spirit Palace. There were more than 10,000 spirits. There were all kinds of spirits. And these spirits were surrounding Xiaolinger. And Xiaolinger was giving them divine crystals of fortune. At this moment, Xiaolinger suddenly looked up at Yi Xian. The next moment, she flew directly in front of Yi Xian, and all the spirits surrounded them. All the spirits were looking at Yi Xian and Xiaoling. Xiaolinger grinned. "Brother, I want money." Yi Xian laughed. He took out a storage ring and handed it to Xiaolinger. Xiaolinger glanced at it, and the next moment, her eyes widened. Wow! As she said that, she gave Yi Xian a big hug. There were 300,000 divine crystals of fortune in the storage ring. The reason why he did not give more was because he was afraid that this little girl would waste it. Xiaolinger began to give the spirits divine crystals of fortune. She was very generous because she had doubled the reward. Seeing that Xiaolinger had doubled the reward, the spirits were overjoyed. For a moment, the entire Spirit Palace was filled with chattering laughter. At this moment, Guanyin's expression suddenly changed. She looked at Yi Xian. "She's gone." Yi Xian frowned slightly. "Who?" Guanyin said with a trembling voice. "Miss Nian Nian." Yi Xian directly disappeared. The next moment, he arrived in a starry sky. But that starry sky was empty. Mu Nianyan's main body was gone. Yi Xian was stunned. P.S. Please. Chapter 1394. Gone. Yi Xian stood in the starry sky, looking as if he had lost his soul. At this time, Guanyin appeared beside Yi Xian, her expression extremely ugly. Yi Xian asked, "What happened?" Guanyin shook her head. "I don't know." At this time, an old man suddenly appeared beside Yi Xian and Guanyin. The old man bowed to them. "Greetings, Alliance Leader Yi." "Miss Guan." Yi Xian looked at the old man. "What happened?" The old man shook his head. "I don't know either." Miss Nian's body was still there, but just now, her body disappeared. Yi Xian slowly closed his eyes. Sister Nian's body was taken away? Who? Doubting? Thinking of this, Yi Xian suddenly opened his eyes. At this time, Yi Jiming suddenly said, "It can't be doubting." Yi Xian asked, "Why?" Yi Jiming said solemnly, "You need to calm down." Yi Xian fell silent, clenching his fists. Yi Jiming continued, "Doubting bringing Mu Nianyan's body is meaningless. Are they going to use her body to threaten you? That's obviously impossible. Moreover, with your current strength, if someone stepped into the fifth dimension, you would definitely be able to detect it, right?" Yi Xian slowly clenched his right fist. Yi Jiming was right. With his current strength, if someone stepped into the fifth dimension, he would be able to detect it immediately. But just now he did not sense any aura. Who is it? Yi Xian swept his gaze across the starry sky, his eyes as cold as ice. At this time, Source Spirit suddenly appeared. She looked at the empty starry sky in the distance, stunned, then looked at Yi Xian. "It's gone." Yi Xian nodded. Source Spirit asked, doubting. Yi Xian shook his head. "Doesn't seem like it." Saying this, he slowly closed his eyes. Doubting. The Dao Tomb? But it didn't look like it. There was no reason for the Dao Tomb. Although there was a reason for doubting. What was doubting doing with Sister Nian's body? Was he going to use it to threaten him? That was possible. With that thought in mind, Yi Xian opened his eyes. And in the next moment, he vanished on the spot. Guanyin's expression changed when she saw this. She wanted to stop Yi Xian, but Yi Xian had disappeared without a trace. In the abyss of the heaven realm, in front of the main hall of the divine palace, a sword light suddenly appeared. Almost at the same time, a spear pierced through the air from within the palace. Boom! In the sky above the divine palace, a sword light exploded, and a man appeared above the divine palace. The person who had arrived was precisely Yi Xian. When Yi Xian appeared, Bai Dizzy, true martial god, and White Robe appeared as well. Bai Dizzy stared fixedly at Yi Xian. What are you trying to do? Yi Xian looked at Bai Dizzy. Did you do it? Bai Dizzy frowned slightly. What do you mean we did it? Yi Xian said fiercely. Sister Nian's body is no longer here. Did you doubting do it? Mu Nian's body. Bai Dizzy was stunned, and then he said, the fifth dimension Tindo's body is gone. Yi Xian stared fixedly at Yi Xian. Did you doubting? Bai Dizzy was about to speak when true martial god suddenly said, Yi Xian, I did not doubting do it. Yi Xian looked at true martial god, and true martial god said solemnly, doubting and you are mortal enemies, but not to this extent. Also Mu Nian is the strongest. Although the omnipotent expert has already fallen, we still respect her very much. We would never do such a shameless thing. Yi Xian's expression became fiercer. If it wasn't you, who else could it be? True martial god looked at Yi Xian. Yi Xian, why do we want Mu Nian's body? Are we going to use it to threaten you? If so, we can use it to threaten you now. Also, doubting is not as despicable as you think. Even if we wanted to kill you, we would not use such despicable means. As he spoke, he glanced at Bai Dizzy. Bai Dizzy immediately said angrily, why are you looking at me? I have never done such a thing, and I disdain to do it. True martial god nodded. Very well. He, Zhen Wu, would never do something like stealing someone's corpse. In the distance, Yi Xian slowly closed his eyes. Not doubting. Could it be the Dao Tomb? At this moment, Qing Yaoyao suddenly appeared next to Yi Xian and looked at Yi Xian. It is not the Dao Tomb. I am sure of this. Not the Dao Tomb. Yi Xian was silent, his expression becoming more and more fierce. Who could it be? After a moment of silence, Yi Xian suddenly turned and left. In the field, Qing Yaoyao frowned. Mu Nian's body was gone. Who would steal Mu Nian's body? Why would they steal it? Qing Yaoyao turned to look at Bai Dizzy and the others. It really wasn't you? True martial god said solemnly. Heavenly monarch, I doubting, am not that despicable. Besides, I, true martial, respect an expert like Mu Nian from the bottom of my heart. Why would I do such a despicable thing? Qing Yaoyao turned to look at Bai Dizzy. Bai Dizzy was expressionless. What, am I that despicable? Qing Yaoyao said indifferently. True martial god is an expert, and he has his pride. But you, Bai Dizzy, don't have that. What immoral things can't you do? Bai Dizzy said coldly. Think whatever you want. Qi Yaoyao said nothing else, and turned to leave. In the field, true martial god said solemnly. Who would steal Mu Nian's body? Bai Dizzy said. Doubting is the most suspicious, followed by the Dao Tomb. True martial god looked at Bai Dizzy. Bai Dizzy said. Although she is dead, her body is also a five-dimensional Tendo, and she is so strong. Her body must be useful. At this point he said angrily. Why are you looking at me like that? I said it. I didn't do it. At this time, White Robe suddenly said. If it wasn't us and not the Dao Tomb, then who could it be? The three fell into silence. After a long time, Bai Dizzy seemed to think of something and his pupils suddenly shrank. Could it be? White Robe and true martial god looked at Bai Dizzy. Bai Dizzy's face was pale, and he was a little frightened. True martial frowned. Could it be what? Bai Dizzy said with a trembling voice. It is possible. It is completely possible. At this point he looked at True Martial and White Robe. Wait for my news. After saying this, he turned around and disappeared. True Martial and White Robe were dumbfounded. Heavenly King Palace. At this time, Luo Ho and the others were there. They already knew that Mu Nian's body in the five-dimensional universe had disappeared. Inside the palace, Luo Ho looked at Qian Yaoyao. Do you think this was done by doubting? Qian Yaoyao shook her head. It doesn't seem like it. Like what True Martial said, They are not that despicable. Especially true martial in white robe. No matter what, they would not do anything to Mu Nianyan's body. That kind of powerhouse is respected by everyone. Luo Ho nodded. Even he respected Mu Nianyan from the bottom of his heart. Powerhouses still had their pride, especially people like True Martial and White Robe. Therefore, he did not believe that White Robe and True Martial had done anything to Mu Nianyan's body. At this time Bitter King suddenly said, "If it is not us and not doubting, then who could it be? Or does this Yi Xian have other enemies?" In the palace, Qian Yaoyao was silent. No one spoke either. The palace sank into silence. After an unknown amount of time, Qian Yaoyao's pupils suddenly shrank. Could it be? In the palace, everyone looked at Qian Yaoyao. Qi Yaoyao did not speak. She stood up and left. After leaving the palace, she disappeared without a trace. No one knew where she went. In the palace, the three looked at each other. In the starry sky, Yi Xian just stood there, staring at the place where Mu Nianyan's body had been. Disappeared without a trace. It was not the Dao tomb, nor was it doubting. Then who could it be? Yi Xian's eyes were somewhat blank. Who took Sister Nian's body away? Yi Ling. She had the ability to take Sister Nian's body away without a trace, but she would not do so. Then who else could it be? Could it be that dark abyss? But that was not possible either. He could not think of anyone else. Just like that, Yi Xian stood in the starry sky for a whole day and a night. On this day, Yi Xian had unknowingly arrived in Shaman City. He just walked on the streets, looking as if he had lost his soul. Shaman City was bustling. There were stalls on both sides of the streets, and the sounds of people shouting could be heard. At that moment, an angry voice suddenly came from Yi Xian's right. "You thief, how dare you steal?" Yi Xian looked in the direction of the sound. Not far away, a fat man was whipping a beggar crazily with a wooden stick. The beggar was curled up on the ground, hugging something tightly. He did not make a sound even though he was being whipped by the fat man. The beggar's hair was long, messy, and dirty. His face could not be seen. The fat man stepped on the beggar and scolded, "How dare you steal from me? Tui!" As he spoke, he continued whipping the beggar with the wooden stick. At that moment, Yi Xian suddenly appeared before the fat man. When he saw Yi Xian, a hint of wariness appeared in the fat man's eyes, because Yi Xian's attire told him that he was not a normal person, and he even had a sword with him. Yi Xian crouched down before the beggar and gently pushed aside the beggar's messy hair. When he saw the beggar's face, he was instantly stunned. It was a little girl, but her face was very dirty, and there were even wounds on it. The little girl was terrified. She hugged the thing in her hands tightly and her body trembled. "Don't hit me. It hurts," Yi Xian asked softly. "What's your name?" The little girl cast a glance at Yi Xian and lowered her head slightly. Her lips moved, but she did not say anything. Yi Xian said gently, "Don't be afraid, I won't hit you." The little girl lifted her head slightly. She cast a glance at Yi Xian, but soon lowered her head and said in a voice as soft as a mosquito, "Nian, Nian. My name is Nian Nian." Hearing this, Yi Xian instantly felt as if he had been struck by lightning. He was petrified on the spot. In the little girl's arms was a fish that was still jumping. The little girl hugged the fish tightly, and she was terrified. Chapter 1395. Nian Nian. Yi Xian looked at the little girl in front of him, as if he had lost his soul. Sister Nian? This thought flashed through Yi Xian's mind. However, the little girl in front of him looked completely different from Sister Nian. However, he felt that this little girl looked familiar. This was also the reason why he had stopped in his tracks. At this moment, the fat man suddenly said, "Who are you?" As he spoke, he constantly tapped his palm with the wooden stick, as if he was threatening her. Yi Xian was about to speak, when the little girl suddenly hugged her knees and buried her head in them. She said with a trembling voice, "Don't hit me. It hurts." A ruthless glint flashed through the fat man's eyes. He was about to grab the little girl's hair, when a sword suddenly pierced through his forehead. Hiss! Blood splattered. The expressions of the people on the street changed drastically as they retreated. Yi Xian ignored everyone. He squatted in front of the little girl and said gently, "Don't worry, no one will hit you." The little girl seemed to be very afraid. She curled up into a ball, but she kept hugging her fish. Even when she was being beaten up badly, she didn't let go of the fish. Yi Xian felt his heart ache for some reason when he saw that the little girl was still very afraid. As if he had thought of something, he pressed his palm gently against the ground. In an instant, a ball of fire appeared on the ground. Yi Xian gently crooked his index finger, and a fish flew into his hand from a bucket in the distance. He cleaned the fish quickly, and then started to grill it. Soon, the fragrance of fish wafted through the air. At this moment, the little girl raised her head slightly. When she saw the roasted fish in Yi Xian's hand, she blinked, but she quickly buried her head in her lap. Clearly she was still very afraid. Yi Xian hurriedly took out some seasonings and placed them on the roasted fish. Soon, the roasted fish became even more fragrant. The little girl would steal a glance at the roasted fish from time to time. Yi Xian handed the roasted fish to Nian Nian and said gently, "Here, this is for you." The little girl raised her head and looked at Yi Xian. Her throat rolled, but she did not dare to take it. Yi Xian smiled and said gently, "Don't be afraid. With me around, no one will dare to hit you." After hesitating for a while, the little girl slowly reached for the grilled fish. Yi Xian tried his best to make his smile amiable. He had never been so cautious before. The little girl held onto the grilled fish, and Yi Xian immediately let go. The little girl's throat rolled, and she was about to eat when Yi Xian hurriedly said, "Be careful, it's hot." As he spoke, he quickly blew on the grilled fish. The little girl glanced at Yi Xian and took a bite. When the fish entered her mouth, she blinked and quickly took a few more bites. At the side, Yi Xian squatted down and looked at the little girl in front of her. Is that Sister Nian? Yi Xian didn't know, but he hoped so. Soon, the little girl finished the grilled fish. Yi Xian blinked. "Do you want more?" The little girl nodded. Yi Xian hurriedly continued grilling. Soon, he handed the grilled fish to the little girl. "Here." The little girl glanced at Yi Xian. There was no longer any fear in her eyes. The little girl took the grilled fish and seemed to have thought of something. She tore off a piece of fish and handed it to Yi Xian. Her hands were very, very dirty. Yi Xian's heart ached when he saw this. He took the piece of fish and put it in his mouth. After eating it, he blinked and smiled. "I want more." The little girl looked at Yi Xian. Xian blinked, and then she tore off another piece of fish and gave it to Yi Xian. After Yi Xian finished eating, he looked at the grilled fish in the little girl's hand. The little girl hesitated for a moment, then tore off another piece of fish and gave it to Yi Xian. However, Yi Xian didn't take it. He pointed at the fish in the little girl's arms. At this moment, the fish was already dead. The little girl understood what Yi Xian meant. She hesitated for a while, and then handed the fish to Yi Xian. After Yi Xian cleaned the fish, he started grilling it. Soon, Yi Xian finished grilling the fish and shared it with the little girl. At this moment, the little girl was no longer wary of him. After eating the fish, Yi Xian suddenly stood up and extended his hand to the little girl. He smiled and said, "Let's go home." "Home?" The little girl was stunned. Then she lowered her head slightly. Yi Xian smiled and said, "I'll grill fish for you for the rest of your life." The little girl looked up at Yi Xian. She just looked at Yi Xian with a confused look in her eyes. Yi Xian looked at the little girl with a smile. His hand was still extended in the same way. A moment later, the little girl suddenly extended her hand and placed it in Yi Xian's. Yi Xian smiled and said, "Let's go." Just as the little girl was about to stand up, she seemed to have affected her wounds. She immediately gasped and looked at Yi Xian with tears in her eyes. "It hurts." Looking at the little girl who was covered in injuries, Yi Xian felt like a knife was being twisted in his heart. He hurriedly squatted down and took out a pill for the little girl. "Here, take it." The little girl didn't refuse. She opened her mouth and swallowed the pill. Very quickly, the pill transformed into a pure energy that spread throughout her body. In a short while, all the injuries on her body had basically recovered. The little girl moved her hands. Then she lifted her head to look at Yi Xian. The shocked look on her face was very cute. Yi Xian smiled and said, It's amazing, right? The little girl nodded vigorously. Yi Xian laughed and pulled the little girl's hand. Let's go home. The little girl nodded. She held on to Yi Xian's hand tightly, as if she was afraid that Yi Xian would run away. Yi Xian pulled the little girl and slowly walked into the distance. At this moment, Yi Jiming's voice suddenly sounded in Yi Xian's mind. She is. Yi Xian said softly in his heart. I know. Yi Jiming said solemnly. Now I understand something. Yi Xian asked. What is it? Yi Jiming said. She was born because of the fifth dimension, and then died because of the fifth dimension. If I'm not wrong, she was able to be reborn because you cured the fifth dimension. The fifth dimension. The current fifth dimension was unprecedentedly good. Not only were there more than 160 dragon veins, there were also more than 10,000 heaven and earth spirits. Other than that, under Yi Xian's management, there were no more wars in the fifth dimension. No super experts dared to fight in the fifth dimension. Moreover, Yi Xian also brought back some top-grade ore veins. These top-grade ore veins could also nourish the heaven and earth. Under such circumstances, not only had the fifth dimension's tribulation completely disappeared, the origin of the fifth dimension, which was the origin spirit, had also been restored. At this moment, Yi Jiming said again, the origin of the fifth dimension has been restored, and the fifth dimension's tribulation has also disappeared. In other words, there is no need for her to suppress it. It was this universe that allowed her to be reborn. However, what I don't understand is why she lost her memories and doesn't have any power. Yi Xian looked at the little girl beside him. He was also very curious. He could now confirm that this little girl was Sister Nian. However, why did Sister Nian lose her memories? Not only that, she also completely lost her power. Could it be because of her previous injuries? At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly stopped. Not far away from him stood an old man. Bai Emperor's son. Bai Dizzy just stared at the little girl beside Yi Xian. The little girl was somewhat afraid, and hurriedly hid behind Yi Xian. Bai Dizzy gave Yi Xian a deep look before turning to leave. Yi Xian was silent. He knew that Bai Dizzy already knew that the little girl behind him was Sister Nian. At this moment, Qing Yaoyao suddenly appeared not far away from Yi Xian. She looked at the little girl, who only had her head poked out from behind Yi Xian in silence. Yi Xian looked at Qing Yaoyao, not saying anything. After a moment, Qing Yaoyao softly said, Have you thought about the consequences? Yi Xian smiled. What consequences? Qing Yaoyao looked at Yi Xian. They won't let her recover her memories and strength. They will do it at all costs. Yi Xian smiled. Then what about the Dao tomb? Qing Yaoyao shook her head. I don't know. Her appearance will make everyone wary of you. With that, she glanced at the little girl behind Yi Xian. Take care. With that, she sighed softly and turned to leave. She didn't expect this fifth dimension Tendo to still be alive. No, it should be rebirth. This rebirth was definitely not a good thing for Yi Xian. This was because Mu Niannian had not only lost her memories, but also her strength. Would doubting help Mu Niannian recover her memories? Would doubting help Mu Niannian recover her strength? No. Doubting would kill this little girl at all costs. At all costs. On the field, Yi Xian was silent. He naturally understood what Qing Yaoyao meant. He originally needed time to develop, but now he didn't have any. At this moment, the little girl suddenly tugged at Yi Xian's hand. Hey, Yi Xian smiled. He looked at the little girl. Don't worry. With me here, no one can hurt you. No one. With that, he squatted down and smiled. Come, I'll carry you home. The little girl blinked, then shook her head. Dirty. Yi Xian smiled. Nian Nian isn't dirty at all. With that, he bent his body. The little girl hesitated, then climbed onto Yi Xian's back. Yi Xian carried the little girl and walked away slowly. On the way, Yi Xian suddenly asked, Nian Nian, do you remember what happened in the past? The little girl shook her head. I don't remember. Yi Xian asked, Not at all. The little girl was silent. Yi Xian asked, Just a little? The little girl pressed her head against Yi Xian's back and said softly, I think I had a dream. That dream was very long. But I don't remember many things in the dream. But, Yi Xian hurriedly asked. But what? The little girl glanced at Yi Xian and said softly, I think you were in that dream. Yi Xian was stunned. Then he smiled. Really? The little girl nodded. Really? Yi Xian said with a smile. Am I good or bad in your dream? The little girl thought about it and said, In the dream, you were always causing trouble. I don't remember anything else. Yi Xian slowly walked away with the little girl on his back. He didn't know when, but his cheeks were covered in tears. P.S. I also had a dream. In the dream, I was first in the monthly votes. There were so many monthly votes. There were people fighting to vote for me every day. Chapter 1396. Yi Xian brought the little girl back to the sword hall where he lived. Guanyin was also in the hall. Yi Xian brought the little girl to Guanyin. He looked at Guanyin and said, Take her to clean up. Guanyin nodded slightly. All right. With that, she stretched out her hand to the little girl. However, the little girl hid behind Yi Xian. Guanyin looked at Yi Xian. Yi Xian squatted down and grabbed the little girl's hands. He smiled and said, It's all right. Big sister is also a good person. She won't hurt you. The little girl glanced at Guanyin and lowered her head slightly. Yi Xian gently rubbed the little girl's head and said softly, Don't be afraid. Tell me who bullied you. I'll beat him to death. The little girl raised her head and looked at Yi Xian. She said softly, You don't go. Yi Xian smiled. I won't go. Go take a bath with big sister and change into a nice set of clothes, okay? The little girl looked at her clothes. She hesitated for a long time before nodding. Yi Xian looked at Guanyin. Guanyin held the little girl's hand and walked towards the inner hall. Inside the hall, Yi Xian sat cross-legged on the ground and slowly closed his eyes. Yi Jiming suddenly said, What do you think doubting will do next? Yi Xian didn't say anything. What will doubting do? A moment later, Yi Xian left the sword hall and came to the fish stall where he first met Nian Nian. At this moment there was no one here. Yi Xian walked to the fish stall. There was a corpse in front of the fish stall. It was the corpse of the fishmonger. After a moment of silence, Yi Xian opened his palm, and the soul-suppressing sword appeared in his hand. The next moment, the soul-suppressing sword trembled slightly, and a shadow floated out. It was the soul of the fishmonger who had whipped Nian Nian. He had used the soul-suppressing sword to kill the fishmonger. Although the soul-suppressing sword had absorbed the fishmonger's soul, it hadn't completely digested it. Thus his soul was still there. Seeing Yi Xian, the fishmonger hurriedly kowtowed and said with a trembling voice, Spare me, spare me. Yi Xian looked at the fishmonger. It was Nian Nian's fault for stealing your fish. It was my fault for killing you. As he spoke, he opened his palm and then pressed it lightly towards fishmonger. Very soon, a mysterious force enveloped fishmonger, and gradually, fishmonger's soul entered his body. Not long after, fishmonger slowly opened his eyes. He looked at the sky with slight confusion, and he found it hard to believe that he was still alive. As if he had thought of something, the fishmonger hurriedly got up. He knelt before Yi Xian and kowtowed as if pounding garlic. Thank you, immortal, for not killing me. Thank you, immortal, for not killing me. Yi Xian opened his palm. A black scroll and a bottle of pills landed in front of the fishmonger. This is a cultivation technique. If you cultivate this technique, it shouldn't be difficult for you to live for 100 years. Sister Nian ate one of your fish, and I gave you a fortune. We're even. As he spoke, he turned and left. Behind him, the fishmonger was still kowtowing crazily. However, at this moment, he wasn't afraid, but excited and agitated. After Yi Xian left the city gate, he suddenly said, Come. As his voice fell, a shadow appeared beside him and bowed respectfully. Yi Xian said softly, Secretly observe him. If he's evil, kill him. If he's good, help him. The shadow bowed respectfully. Yes. As he spoke, he quietly disappeared. Yi Xian slowly closed his eyes. Sister Nian, we don't owe anyone anything, even if it's a fish. After he finished speaking, he also disappeared. Heaven Realm Abyss Heavenly Palace. Inside the palace, Bai Dizzy sat on a chair and did not speak for a long time. He had been sitting for a full 2 hours. During this time he did not say a word. Next to him, True Martial Divine Lord and White Robe's expressions were extremely grave. They did not expect that Moon Yinyan had been reborn. That woman was not Yi Xian. Yi Xian's threat was in the future, but that woman's threat was now. Now that the fifth dimension had recovered its vitality, there was no need for her to suppress it. What did this mean? It meant that once she recovered her memories, she would be in her peak state. How terrifying would a peak fifth dimension Tendo be? Could she instantly kill a Dao ancestor? Most likely. As they thought of this, the three people's expressions became even uglier. At this moment, Bai Dizzy suddenly said softly, "She has lost her memories. She has lost her strength." White Robe and True Martial looked at Bai Dizzy. Bai Dizzy slowly closed his eyes. In other words, the current her has no strength at all. Hearing this, True Martial narrowed his eyes, and a cold light flashed in his eyes. If Moon Yinyan was in her peak state, even if everyone in the doubting joined forces, they would not be her opponent. However, she had lost her memories and strength. Right now, she was just an ordinary little girl. A little girl who could be killed with a flick of a finger. At this moment, White Robe suddenly said, "This matter cannot be delayed." Bai Dizzy nodded. Their top priority now is to get rid of Moon Yinyan as soon as possible. Otherwise, who knew when she would regain her memories and strength? Perhaps it would be tomorrow. True Martial suddenly said, "There is another problem. The Dao Tomb." Bai Dizzy stood up. "I will go talk to them." True Martial looked at Bai Dizzy. What if they can't come to an agreement? Bai Dizzy did not even turn his head. Then we will all perish together. True Martial White Robe, gather all the experts in the doubting. Remember all of them. With that, he had already disappeared into the distance. Dao Tomb City. Bai Dizzy came to the Dao Tomb City alone. He had just entered when Luo Ho appeared in front of him. Ke Yao Yao Bitter King and Zhan Man were also there. Bai Dizzy went straight to the point. Moon Yinyan's death is beneficial to both of us. Ke Yao Yao smiled. It's beneficial to the doubting, right? Bai Dizzy looked at Ke Yao Yao. Yao Yao, does the Dao Tomb really want to see such a powerful person appear? The corners of Ke Yao Yao's mouth curled up. Why not? Her appearance is not detrimental to us. On the contrary, if she regains her memories and strength, the first person she will kill will be the doubting, right? Bai Dizzy smiled. Then let's not talk about it. Perish together. With that, he turned and disappeared into the horizon. Perish together. The smile on Ke Yao Yao's face gradually faded. She knew that the doubting was not joking, because the doubting had no way out. If they did not get rid of Moon Yinyan now, once Moon Yinyan regained her memories and strength, the doubting's life would be in the hands of Moon Yinyan. It could be said that they would kill Moon Yinyan at all costs, even if they had to perish together with the Dao Tomb. At this moment, Luo Ho suddenly said, "We cannot interfere." Ke Yao Yao looked at Luo Ho. Luo Ho said softly, "The doubting is already desperate." Ke Yao Yao was silent. Luo Ho looked at Ke Yao Yao. "What do you think?" Ke Yao Yao said, "We have two choices. The first is to watch from the sidelines and let the doubting and Yi Xian fight to the death while we reap the benefits." Luo Ho said, "The second." Ke Yao Yao said, "The second is to help Yi Xian fight the doubting until Moon Yinyan regains her memories and strength." The Bitter King suddenly said, "What are the benefits?" Ke Yao Yao said, "The benefit is to form an alliance with the fifth dimension, a true alliance. In the future, we will have a powerful ally." The Bitter King shook his head. Luo Ho also shook his head. Ally. They never believed in allies. Moreover, at that time, Moon Yinyan's fifth dimension would be suppressing the Dao Tomb. Just as the White Emperor's son had said, they did not wish for someone as powerful as Moon Yinyan to appear. Ke Yao Yao was silent. She already knew everyone's choice. For now, the first choice was the most suitable for the Dao Tomb. Wouldn't it be better to let Yi Xian and the doubting fight to the death? After all, the Dao Tomb did not need to do anything, and they could reap the benefits. If Yi Xian lost, the Dao Tomb would not suffer any losses. If the doubting lost, it would be a great thing for the Dao Tomb. At this moment, Ke Yao Yao suddenly said, I will go to the fifth dimension. She was about to leave when Luoho suddenly said, Celestial Monarch. Yi Xian turned to look at Luoho and smiled. You can't be too ruthless. What do you think? Luoho was silent for a moment, then said, Have a sense of propriety. Kei Yaoyao did not say anything else, and disappeared into the horizon. In the fifth dimension. In the sword hall, Guanyin walked out with the little girl. At this moment, the little girl looked completely different. Her hair had been tied into a braid by Guanyin. She looked extremely cute. The little girl's appearance was completely different from Sister Nian. But Yi Xian knew that she was Sister Nian. When she saw Yi Xian, Nian ran to his side and grabbed his arm. She looked up at Yi Xian and said, Eat fish. Eat fish. Yi Xian laughed. Let's go, I will roast fish for you. After saying this, he pulled Nian out of the hall. Inside the hall, Guanyin was silent, his expression extremely solemn. Sister Nian's rebirth was naturally a great thing for the fifth dimension. However, there was a fatal problem. And that was that Sister Nian had lost her memories and power. At this time, would the doubting give Sister Nian time? Of course not. The doubting would definitely kill Sister Nian at all costs. The fifth dimension would not be peaceful anymore. Yi Xian brought Nian to a river. This was the place where he and Mu Nian had first met. At that time, he did not know that this woman was the Tendo of the fifth dimension. Qing was also there at that time. After Yi Xian caught a few fish from the river, he looked at Nian and said with a smile, Which one do you like? Nian pointed at the largest one with her little finger. Yi Xian laughed. He cleaned up the fish quickly and started a fire to roast it. Nian walked to Yi Xian's side and sat down next to Yi Xian, her eyes fixed on the roasted fish in front of her. Yi Xian suddenly said, Nian, why were you on the street? Nian shook her head. I don't know. Yi Xian turned to look at Nian. Don't you remember why you were on the street? Nian nodded. Yi Xian was silent. Nian's last memory should be on that street. Yi Xian turned to look at Nian. Nian hugged Yi Xian's arm with both hands and said softly, Can I always follow you? Yi Xian smiled and said, Of course you can. Nian looked at Yi Xian. Really? Yi Xian nodded. Really? I'll roast fish for you every day from now on. Nian looked at Yi Xian, and the corners of her mouth curled up slightly. Soon the fish was roasted. Yi Xian lay on the ground and looked at the sky. At this moment, he felt that life was really beautiful. Sister Nian was still here. At this moment, he was also very glad that he had not done something stupid back then, and had properly treated the fifth dimension. The current fifth dimension had never been better, and the creatures of the fifth dimension had never been more united. If Sister Nian recovered her memories and saw the current fifth dimension, how happy would she be? Thinking of this, Yi Xian could not help but feel a little proud. At this moment, Nian suddenly said, It's done. After saying that, she picked up the roasted fish, tore off a piece of fish, and handed it to Yi Xian's mouth. Eat. Yi Xian laughed and bit the piece of fish. Nian blinked. Is it delicious? Yi Xian nodded and said seriously, Of course it's delicious. Don't you see who roasted the fish? Nian giggled. Bullsh *T. Yi Xian laughed. At this moment, an old man suddenly appeared by the river. The person who had come was Bai Dizzy. Yi Xian glanced at Bai Dizzy and continued eating the fish. Nian was a little wary. She hugged Yi Xian's arm tightly. Bai Dizzy looked at Nian. I miscalculated. I should have destroyed your main body back then. The fifth dimension Tendo was not a human. She was born for the fifth dimension and died for the fifth dimension. Her life was closely related to the fifth dimension. As long as the fifth dimension did not perish, she could live because of the fifth dimension. Of course, the most important thing was that her strength was still there. Her main body was also there. Although her soul had scattered between heaven and earth, it had not shattered. The fifth dimension had condensed her soul again. Yi Xian turned to look at Nian and said with a smile, Don't be afraid. I'm here. Nian nodded slightly and hugged Yi Xian's arm tightly. In the distance, Bai Dizzy looked at Yi Xian. Yi Xian, give her to us. Otherwise I doubting will destroy you. Yi Xian looked at Bai Dizzy and said with a smile, come on. Chapter 1397. By the river. Bai Dizzy just stared at Yi Xian. Yi Xian smiled, doubting, if you want to die together with me, I, Yi Xian, will welcome you at any time. Bai Dizzy chuckled. Do you think the Dao Tomb land will help you? Yi Xian, you. Yi Xian suddenly looked at Bai Dizzy. Scram. With that, he picked up the sword beside him and slashed out. In the distance, Bai Dizzy's pupils suddenly shrank. He disappeared on the spot, and reappeared tens of thousands of li away. By the river, Yi Xian shook his head. It wasn't that he didn't want to kill Bai Dizzy, but that this person wasn't easy to kill. This person might not be good at fighting, but he was first-rate at escaping. As soon as he slashed out with his sword, Bai Dizzy was already tens of thousands of li away. Even the sword chi couldn't catch up. At this moment Nian Nian, who was beside Yi Xian, suddenly said, Why does he want to kill me? Yi Xian collected his thoughts. He looked at Nian Nian and smiled. Don't be afraid. I'm here. Nian Nian nodded. All right. Yi Xian pulled Nian Nian to get up and leave. At this moment, Qin Yaoyao suddenly appeared in front of the two. Qin Yaoyao glanced at Nian Nian, and then at Yi Xian. Let's talk. Yi Xian smiled. Let's talk. The three walked along the river into the distance. On the way, Qin Yaoyao said softly, the Dao Tomb land has decided not to interfere. Yi Xian nodded. I guessed it. Qin Yaoyao turned to look at Yi Xian. Is the person behind you going to appear? Yi Xian smiled. No. Qin Yaoyao looked at Yi Xian. Then what do you have to rely on? Yi Xian said softly. I don't have anything to rely on. It's just my life. Qin Yaoyao stared at Yi Xian without saying a word. Yi Xian smiled and said, I'm telling the truth. After a moment of silence, Yin Yaoyao looked at Nian Nian. Nian Nian was a little timid and hid behind Yi Xian. Qin Yaoyao softly said, You must help her recover her memories and strength as soon as possible. Yi Xian shook his head. Let nature take its course. He also wanted Nian Nian to recover her memory and strength, but this matter could not be rushed. Moreover, he had no other way. This matter could only rely on Nian Nian himself. Qin Yaoyao looked at Yi Xian. Are you really going to risk your life? Yi Xian smiled and said, Do I have any other way? Feng Yaoyao was silent. Yi Xian suddenly said, Miss Yaoyao should have other matters to discuss today, right? After a long silence, Qin Yaoyao opened her palm, and an ancient scroll appeared in front of Yi Xian. Yi Xian was a little curious. This is, Qi Yaoyao said, Doubting's information. The number of Doubting's experts and trump cards are basically all inside. Of course, I can't be sure if Doubting has other trump cards, but Doubting's experts are basically all inside. Yi Xian put away the scroll. Thank you. Qin Yaoyao shook her head. It's just a small favor. Saying that, she glanced at Nian Nian. Because of my position, I can't help you anymore. Take care. After saying that, her figure trembled and disappeared. In the same place, Yi Xian was silent. At this moment, a phantom suddenly appeared not far from Yi Xian. The phantom gradually solidified. It was a black-robed man. Yi Xian flicked his finger, and a token appeared in front of the black-robed man. This black-robed man was none other than the mysterious person who had given him the ice coffin. The mysterious person looked at Yi Xian. I'll help you once. Yi Xian smiled. Senior, can you beat a Dao Attainment Realm expert? The mysterious person shook his head. I can't, but I can barely hold up a Dao Attainment Realm expert. Yi Xian nodded. That's enough. After saying that, he pulled Nian Nian away. In the same place, the mysterious person was silent for a long time before saying softly, Doubting, are you really going to bully his son? How dare you? After saying that, he disappeared without a sound. At the end of the distance, Nian Nian held Yi Xian's hand tightly. Is someone coming to beat us up? Yi Xian smiled. Yes. Are you afraid? Nian Nian looked at Yi Xian and asked, Are you afraid? Yi Xian blinked. A little. Nian Nian hesitated for a moment before saying, Then I'm a little afraid too. Yi Xian laughed. After a moment, Nian Nian said again, "Are they going to beat me up?" Yi Xian nodded. "Yes." Nian Nian said. "Will you protect me?" Yi Xian said. "Yes." Nian Nian said. "What if you can't beat them?" Yi Xian said. "What do you think I should do?" Nian Nian said. "If you hand me over, will they stop beating you up?" Yi Xian said. "No, their goal is to kill you and then kill me." After a long time, Nian Nian said again, "Why are you protecting me?" Yi Xian said. "There's no reason. I just want to protect you." Nian Nian said softly. "But there should be a reason for everything." Yi Xian said. "Because I like you, so I'm protecting you. Is that a good reason?" Nian Nian stopped in her tracks. She looked at Yi Xian and asked seriously, "Do you really like me?" Yi Xian nodded. Nian Nian asked again, "Why?" Yi Xian was speechless. Nian Nian said, "Why do you like me? There must be a reason." Yi Xian asked, "Why do you like eating fish?" Nian Nian said, "If you like it, then eat it. There's no reason." Yi Xian smiled and said, "I like you like fish. If I like you, then I like you. There's no reason." Nian Nian said, "But I'm not a fish." After a moment of silence, Yi Xian said, "Why don't we change the topic?" Nian Nian said, "All right." Yi Xian heaved a sigh of relief. Nian Nian said, "What do you like about me?" Yi Xian said, "I like everything." Nian Nian said, "Why do you like everything?" "I like eating fish, but I don't like fish bones. There must be something about me that you don't like." Yi Xian fell silent. Nian Nian said, "Why?" Yi Xian said, "I don't like it when you lie to me." Nian Nian blinked. "Have I ever lied to you?" Yi Xian nodded. "In my dream, we went to a place. You lied to me and said that we would definitely come back together. But you didn't." Nian Nian held Yi Xian's hand and said with some heartache, "Don't be angry. I won't lie to you next time." Yi Xian smiled and said, "It's a deal." Nian Nian said seriously, "Definitely. Soon." The two of them disappeared at the end of the river hand in hand. In the sky above the fifth dimension, Ying Yaoyao looked down and remained silent. Beside her was Luo Hua. Luo Hua said in a deep voice, "The doubting has already gathered all the experts. Everyone who is in seclusion, except for the Tao ancestors, has already rushed to the heaven abyss." Ying Yaoyao was silent. Luo Hua said, "The doubting is going to destroy everything this time. They will kill Mu Ninian at all costs." Saying so, he looked at Ying Yaoyao. "Heavenly Monarch, I know you love talent, but this Yi Xian is a huge whirlpool. Our Tao burial mound cannot be dragged into this whirlpool, or we will be consigned to eternal damnation." Ying Yaoyao nodded. "I understand." Luo Hua sighed. "To be honest, I also admire this Yi Xian. Unfortunately, he is not from our Tao burial mound." Ying Yaoyao suddenly said, "Luo Hua, do you think our Tao burial mound should change?" Luo Hua looked at Ying Yaoyao. "What do you want to change?" Ying Yaoyao smiled. "What are we fighting for?" Luo Hua was silent. Ying Yaoyao looked at Luo Hua. "We are fighting for our own interests. Back then, we became Tao breakers because the great Tao was unfair. We fought for the beliefs in our hearts. But now our Tao burial mound has lost its beliefs. No one is fighting for their own interests. If we destroy the doubting, we will be the next doubting." Luo Hua said nothing. Ying Yaoyao said softly, "Our original intentions. We don't know when, but we have forgotten our original intentions. Why can't anyone create a new path on the path of Tao breakers? Because we are no different from the doubting in the first place." With that she turned and left. Luo Hua said in a low voice, "Where are you going?" In the distance, Qi Yaorao didn't even look back. "Follow my heart." With that, she disappeared into the distance. Luo Hua was silent. Yi Xian didn't bring Nian Nian back to the Sword Hall. Instead, he brought her to the fourth dimension, the Nether Hall. Yi Xian came to this place again. The hall was deserted with only a few statues. Yi Xian looked at the statues and said softly, "Is anyone there?" No response. Yi Xian was silent for a long time. Then, he turned and left with Nian Nian. Outside the hall, Yi Xian wasn't disappointed. He didn't put his hopes on others. It was naturally good for him to find a helper. But it didn't matter if he couldn't. Meanwhile, a voice suddenly resounded within the hall. Is there something you need? Yi Xian turned around and looked into the hall, but there was no one there. Yi Xian bowed slightly. May I know who it is? The voice resounded once more. Is there something you need? Yi Xian hesitated for a moment and said, Does Senior know about doubting? The voice replied, I don't. Yi Xian was speechless. The voice spoke again. Is there something you need? Yi Xian thought for a moment and said, Senior, can you help me with something? The voice fell silent for a moment before it said, What is it? Yi Xian said, Fight. The voice fell silent. Yi Xian waited silently for an answer. After a long time, the voice resounded once more. Someone has told me. I don't want to help you. Yi Xian blinked. Who? Who? The voice replied. Someone you know. Yi Xian was quite stunned. Someone I know. Could it be that mysterious expert within Yi Ling's body? Or perhaps it's that woman with the spear. Meanwhile, the voice spoke again. Your path is very long, and you have to walk it yourself. The path you walk is the path that belongs to you. Do you understand what I mean? Yi Xian spoke in a low voice. Senior, doubting wants to gang up on me. There are many of them. The voice replied. Deal with it yourself. Yi Xian hesitated for a moment before he said, Can you help me a little? The voice replied, No. Yi Xian laughed miserably. Forget it. In any case, I've been orphaned since I was young, and I've had to endure all sorts of disasters. Alas, let's not talk about it. It's meaningless to talk about it. In any case, I'm an orphan. I'll get used to it. I'll get used to it. As he spoke, he pulled Nian Nian towards the distance. At this moment, a voice suddenly resounded from within the hall. Wait. P.S. Thank you for your monthly votes and tips. Thank you. Thank you for your support. I'm going to buy a car soon. Do you have any suggestions? A two-wheeled one. Chapter 1398. Outside the Nether Palace, Yi Xian stopped in his tracks. At this moment, the voice sounded from inside the palace. We are too far away from here. Do you understand what I mean? Yi Xian was silent. At this moment, the voice sounded again. No one knew what the voice said, but Yi Xian suddenly looked happy. He bowed slightly to the Nether Palace, then turned around and left with Nian Nian. Yi Xian returned to the fifth dimension with Nian Nian, and at this moment, the fifth dimension was on full alert. Yi Xian arrived at the Sword Sect, where hundreds of swordsmen from the Sword Sect were already waiting. All the swordsmen had reached the self-release realm. Although they were only at the self-release realm, they had the strength to fight Dao Validation realm. But this was not enough. Yi Xian found Senior Sister Lu, and took out a storage ring, and handed it to her. Senior Sister Lu looked at Yi Xian. What's inside? Yi Xian smiled. Look. Senior Sister Lu glanced at it, and the next moment, her expression changed drastically. This? Inside the storage ring were some divine objects. Those were the treasures of the Jiaolong clan. Among them, there were countless treasures of the Dao Validation realm. Although there were few treasures of the Dao Validation realm, there were still some. After all, Yi Xian's soul-suppressing sword was only at the Dao Validation realm. Senior Sister Lu looked at Yi Xian. Where did you go to rob? Yi Xian smiled. A senior gave it to me. After a moment of silence, Senior Sister Lu said, With this equipment, my sword sex swordsman can kill Dao Validation realm. Gu Nian and the others can kill Dao Validation realm. Yi Xian nodded. Okay. After saying that, he turned around and left with Nian Nian. At this moment, Senior Sister Lu suddenly said, Are you confident? Yi Xian stopped and turned to look at Senior Sister Lu, smiling. No. Senior Lu fell silent. Yi Xian gently rubbed Nian Nian's little head and said with a smile, Senior Martial Sister, can you summon the Patriarch of the Sword Sect? Senior Sister Lu shook her head. Yi Xian shrugged. Others can summon their ancestors. Senior Sister Lu, you should also summon your ancestor. Senior Apprentice Sister Lu glared at Yi Xian. Scram! Yi Xian laughed and left with Nian Nian. Yi Xian brought Nian Nian to the sword hall. He took out the world prism pagoda. At this moment, a woman appeared in front of him. Najialu. He was the last dragon of the Jia dragon clan. Jialo looked at Yi Xian. I want to cultivate a Dao body. Can I? Yi Xian blinked. Can you cultivate? Jialo nodded. Grandfather said that I can cultivate. But he doesn't think he will give it to me. Yi Xian smiled and said, I'll teach. Jialo looked at Yi Xian. Really? Yi Xian nodded. But you have to help me fight. Jialo took out a stick of Tong Hulu and licked it. Then he said, no problem. Next, Yi Xian began to teach Jialo the Dao body. In fact, if time allowed, he wanted to teach in Lanxiu and the others the Dao body. Unfortunately, time did not allow it. Moreover, the Dao body was not easy to cultivate. This was because in Lanxiu and the others had weak physical bodies. The reason he could cultivate it so quickly was because his physical body's foundation was very, very strong. In the five-dimensional universe, there was almost no one whose physical body had reached his level. Of course, Jialo was one of them. She was a member of the Dragon Clan, so her physical body was naturally strong. Once she cultivated a Dao body and reached the Dao defense realm, the strength of her physical body would definitely be above his. If Jialo could cultivate a Dao body, she would definitely be able to fight a Dao realization realm expert. Even if she could not win, she would definitely be able to fight a Dao realization realm expert. In the following time, Yi Xian taught Jialo the Dao body every day to accompany Nian Nian. Of course, he did not forget about doubting. In a certain hall, Yi Xian sat to the side and roasted fish. Beside him was Nian Nian, and in front of him stood a black-robed old man. The black-robed old man bowed slightly to Yi Xian. Young Master Yi, doubting experts have already rushed to the celestial abyss. I'm afraid they will come to the five-dimensional universe in the next few days. Young Master Yi, please make early preparations. Yi Xian said, how many in total? The black-robed old man looked at Yi Xian. Anyone who has reached the Dao confirmation realm has gone to the celestial abyss. In addition, this time, doubting will probably use some trump cards that have never been used before. Also, that Dao ancestor is very likely to appear. Young Master Yi, you must make early preparations. Yi Xian was silent. The black-robed old man cupped his fists. If doubting makes any new moves, this old man will inform young Master Yi immediately. Goodbye. After saying that, he was about to leave. At this time, Yi Xian suddenly said, thank the Celestial King for me. The black-robed old man nodded. This old man will definitely deliver it. After saying that, he disappeared. In the hall, Yi Xian slowly closed his eyes. At this time, Nian Nian suddenly said softly, are they all here to beat me? Yi Xian shook his head. No, they're all here to beat me. Nian Nian looked at Yi Xian. You lied to me. Yi Xian said with a smile. All right. They're all here to beat me. Nian Nian blinked. Why? Just because I stole the fish. But I'm really hungry. I won't steal fish next time. Yi Xian gently rubbed Nian Nian's head and said softly, what's a mere fish? Our entire fifth dimension owes her. If not for Sister Nian, would the fifth dimension still exist? It probably wouldn't even exist anymore. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that the entire fifth dimension owes her. At this time, Guanyin walked in. Guanyin looked at Yi Xian. The fifth dimension is ready. Yi Xian said, the battlefield cannot be in the fifth dimension. Guanyin nodded. If the battlefield was in the fifth dimension, once a fight broke out, regardless of whether the fifth dimension won or lost, it would still suffer heavy losses. Guanyin said in a deep voice, but their goal is not only to kill Miss Nian, but also to destroy the fifth dimension. Yi Xian was silent. The current doubting must have learned to be smart. Killing Sister Nian was not enough. If they wanted to get rid of future troubles, they had to destroy the entire fifth dimension. As long as the entire fifth dimension was destroyed, there would be no possibility of Sister Nian being reborn. At this time, Guanyin said softly, it would be great if Miss Nian could regain her memory. The current fifth dimension no longer needed Mu Niannian to suppress it. Once Mu Niannian regained her memory, doubting and the Dao Tomb would be like ants to her. Therefore, doubting would definitely destroy the fifth dimension. But would Sister Nian regain her memory? Yi Xian glanced at Nian Nian next to him. He was not sure either. Sister Nian had really forgotten everything in the past. As for when she would regain her memory, no one knew. Yi Xian was silent for a moment before smiling. It's okay. I'll take care of it this time. Guanyin looked at Yi Xian. Can you take care of it? Yi Xian smiled. Don't we still have you? Guanyin was stunned for a moment before smiling. Let's take care of it together. Yi Xian said. Have Jiao and Arrow come out of seclusion? Guanyin said in a low voice. Soon. Yi Xian nodded. That's good. After explaining some matters to Guanyin left. Yi Xian continued to roast fish. But his thoughts had already drifted away. Doubting had two Dao realm experts. One was a Dao ancestor, and the other had disappeared for many years. Even the Dao tomb did not know who he was. And now, the only ones who could kill Yi Xian single-handedly were powerhouses at the Dao attainment realm. If he used the power of his bloodline, he might be able to fight a Dao realm expert head-on. It should be a 3-to-7 chance. But if doubting and two Dao realm experts attacked together, he would not stand a chance. Two Dao realm experts were definitely not people he could fight against at the moment. After all, only his physical body had reached the Dao Imperial Realm. His realm had not reached the Dao Imperial Realm. Fighting one Dao realm expert would be difficult, let alone two. Apart from the experts of the Dao realm, if Zhen Wu and the white-robed experts ganged up on him, he would not have much confidence in winning. These two people were infinitely close to the Dao realm. This time, doubting would definitely not give him a chance. They would definitely choose to gang up on him. And now there were basically no other people in the fifth dimension, especially Dao Imperial Realm experts. Doubting Divine Lords, however, had a total of 76. What did this mean? This was equivalent to a total of 76 Dao Manipulation Realm experts in the Dao Court. Doubting Dao Realm experts below the Dao Imperial Realm had a total of 167. 167. It could be said that in terms of lineup, doubting had completely crushed the fifth dimension. Moreover, this was only the doubting's strength on the surface. The Dao Tomb did not know whether doubting had more trump cards. How could they fight? Inside the hall, Yi Xian was quietly roasting fish. At this moment, Nian Nian suddenly hugged Yi Xian's arm and said softly, Did I drag you into this? Yi Xian looked at Nian Nian and said with a smile, No, I dragged you into this. Without him, Yi Xian, Sister Nian would not have fallen back then. Nian Nian looked up at Yi Xian. Those dreams I had were not dreams, right? Yi Xian hesitated for a moment then nodded. Nian Nian had only lost her memory. In fact, she was not stupid at all. Nian Nian looked at Yi Xian. I lost my memory. Am I right? Yi Xian nodded. Nian Nian asked again. Was I very powerful before? Yi Xian laughed. Powerful. Very, very powerful. It is known as the fourth sword in the world. Nian Nian blinked. There are 3 more swords. Yi Xian nodded. Yes. Nian Nian lowered her head slightly. Yi Xian asked softly. What's wrong? Nian Nian hugged Yi Xian's arm tightly with both hands. I can't remember anything. Yi Xian smiled and said, It's okay. If you can't remember, don't force yourself to remember. Nian Nian looked at Yi Xian. But I want to help. Yi Xian gently rubbed Nian Nian's little head. You've already helped me a lot. This time, let me help you once, okay? Nian Nian looked at Yi Xian and didn't say a word. At that moment, Yi Xian suddenly looked up. He saw a familiar old man in the starry sky. By Dizzy. He's here. In the hall, Yi Xian smiled. Then he pulled Nian Nian to her feet and walked out of the hall. Nian Nian held Yi Xian's hand. Can I call you brother? In the distance, Yi Xian shook his head. No. Nian Nian was a little puzzled. Why? Yi Xian said. I'm afraid that he'll hit me after he recovers his memories. Nian Nian blinked. Can't you beat me? Yi Xian hesitated for a moment and was about to speak when Nian Nian suddenly said, You promised me. Don't lie to me. Yi Xian was a little helpless. I can't beat him. He might shatter my Dao body with one punch. Nian Nian giggled and held Yi Xian's hand tightly. Don't be afraid. I won't hit him in the future. Yi Xian hurriedly said, Keep your promise. Nian Nian said seriously. Pinky swear. As she spoke, she extended a finger. Yi Xian laughed. Then he also extended a finger. Just like that, the two fingers gently hooked together. Outside the hall, someone said, I'll protect you in the future. Chapter 1399. In the five-dimensional universe, in the starry sky, Bai Dizzy looked down at the five-dimensional universe with a calm expression. Mu Niannian. The moment he learned that Mu Niannian had been reborn, he really panicked. No, it was fear. Mu Niannian. This woman had shattered the physical body of a Dao ancestor, with only 30% of her strength. Once this woman regained her memory, she could destroy doubting in the blink of an eye. Fortunately, this woman had lost her memory and strength. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly appeared in front of Bai Dizzy. Beside Yi Xian was Nian Nian. Bai Dizzy glanced at Yi Xian, then at Nian Nian. This time, Nian Nian was not afraid. She looked at Bai Dizzy, her right hand holding Yi Xian's hand tightly. Bai Dizzy suddenly looked at Yi Xian. Just one person? Yi Xian smiled. Of course not. Bai Dizzy nodded. I'm looking forward to it. As soon as he finished speaking, the starry sky behind him suddenly split open. Then countless powerful auras surged out like a tide. The first to come out were White Robe and Jin Wu, and behind them stood 76 Sir Gods. All of them were Dao Defense Realm. And behind these 76 people, there were 167 Dao Validation Realm powerhouses. It could be said that all the powerhouses of Doubting had come out. This time, Doubting was fighting with its back to the wall. Although the strength of the five-dimensional universe was not as strong as Doubting, once Mu Niannian regained her memory, the situation would be reversed. Therefore, either Mu Niannian died, or Doubting perished. Bai Dizzy looked at Yi Xian. Yi Xian, you can call the person behind you out. Yi Xian nodded. He turned his head, and saw a black-robed man not far away. It was the black-robed man who had given him the ice coffin. This man in black had a mysterious background. Yi Xian did not know his name, and he did not ask because the other party did not seem to want to have too much karma with him. This time, the other party was here to help fight. After the fight, the other party would probably leave. Bai Dizzy glanced at the man in black, and then looked at Yi Xian. Anything else? Yi Xian smiled and said, Not for now. Bai Dizzy stared at Yi Xian. He suddenly felt uneasy, because Yi Xian was too calm. Based on his understanding of Yi Xian, for this guy to be so calm, he definitely had something to rely on. But what did this guy have to rely on? The Dao Tomb would no longer interfere. Did this guy really come from the Saha world? Bai Dizzy did not believe it at all. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly said, Bai Dizzy, what are you waiting for? Bai Dizzy looked at Yi Xian. Yi Xian smiled and said, Why don't you attack together? Bai Dizzy stared at Yi Xian, deliberately mystifying. Then, he looked at the black-robed man not far away. Your Excellency is? The black-robed man said. I'm helping him fight, that's all. Bai Dizzy was expressionless. Your Excellency, no matter what price he offers, I will Doubting double it. The black-robed man shook his head. It has nothing to do with money. Bai Dizzy was about to say something when the black-robed man suddenly said, Cut the crap. Then he looked at Yi Xian. Who should I fight? Yi Xian pointed at Jin Wu and White Robe in the distance. Those two, the black-robed man said. I can only hold them back. Yi Xian nodded. That's enough. The black-robed man nodded. The next moment he disappeared on the spot. In the distance, Jin Wu looked at White Robe. I'll hold him back. As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly drew his sword and slashed forward. Chi! The sound of something tearing resounded. Boom! The space in front of Jin Wu suddenly trembled violently. The next moment, he was blasted back dozens of feet. Seeing this scene, Bai Dizzy's expression darkened. This black-robed man was actually so strong? Jin Wu gripped his sword tightly with his right hand. A powerful sword momentum gathered in his sword. At this moment, the black-robed man appeared in front of him again. The black-robed man threw a punch. A simple punch. A ruthless look flashed in Jin Wu's eyes. He slashed with his sword. This sword seemed to be able to shatter the starry sky. Boom! The area where the two of them were exploded and turned into nothingness. White Robe didn't attack. Even though Zhen Wu was at a disadvantage, it was still very difficult for the black-robed man to kill Zhen Wu. White Robe looked at Yi Xian. He doesn't seem to be able to fight two at once. Yi Xian fell silent. At this moment, a sword howl resounded in the sky. In the next moment, a little girl suddenly appeared in front of White Robe. Xiaoqi. Yi Xian looked at Xiaoqi and was stunned. He said, Xiaoqi, didn't you go to the third dimension? Xiaoqi glanced at Yi Xian. You're back. Yi Xian blinked. Can you win? Xiaoqi said, I'll give it a try. As soon as she finished speaking, she turned around and slashed with her sword. This slash caused White Robe's brows to instantly knit together. It was a very powerful strike. In the distance, Bai Dizzy's expression instantly sank. Where did this little girl come from? Very quickly, Xiaoqi and White Robe started fighting. The two of them were evenly matched. It had to be said that Yi Xian was a little shocked. Xiaoqi was actually so strong. At this moment, Bai Dizzy suddenly looked at Yi Xian. Letting someone stall White Robe and Zhen Wu. Obviously there is someone else, right? Yi Xian shook his head. There is no one else. Bai Dizzy stared at Yi Xian. Then is everything going to end? Yi Xian smiled. Bai Dizzy, I'll give you a big gift. With that he sent Nian Yin into the Prism Pagoda. After Nian Yin returned to the Prism Pagoda, Yi Xian slowly closed his eyes. Bai Dizzy stared at Yi Xian. He slowly clenched his fists. As for the Sir Gods behind him, they were extremely vigilant. Against Yi Xian, they naturally did not dare to be careless. At this moment, there was a sudden pft sound from behind Yi Xian's buttocks. Everyone was stunned fixedly at Yi Xian. The next moment, how is it possible that he is not afraid of the turbid gas? Bullsh asterisk Yi Xian said with a smile. Yi Xian was farting. Yes. At this moment, looked at Yi Xian for a moment, a deep breath, and then he smiled. Looked at Bai Dizzy and smiled. You have really given us all a pleasant surprise. Do you like it? A great surprise. Bai Dizzy looked at Yi Xian calmly. Yi Xian suddenly pointed with his fingers. The god lords behind him dashed toward Yi Xian directly at Bai Dizzy. As soon as he finished speaking, the moment the sword god lords were extremely fast. Bai Dizzy had already in a blink of an eye. Thousands of they arrived in front of Yi Xian. Yi Xian was silent when he saw this. Yi Xian's lips curled up. This old fart was not good at fighting. Hundreds of thousands of energy swords flew out of his body. He had seen so far. These energy swords were condensed from turbid gas. Let's go. When he saw the energy swords, he turned and left. Bai Dizzy White Robe and Zhen Wu followed him. Retreat. In the starry sky. Quickly. Yi Xian slowly closed his eyes. The dozen god lords who were charging at the front. The next time the doubting beehives by the energy swords. It would not be the Dao Attainment Realm. Even Dao Attainment Realm experts did not dare to belittle the greatest threat to Yi Xian was the Dao Attainment Manipulation Realm. In the heaven abyss, stand it. Even though more than a dozen divine lords were caught off guard, afraid of the turbid and were killed immediately. He was not as for the remaining divine lords. However, they reacted not quickly and retreated the heaven abyss. This retreat took them tens of thousands of feet away. But Yi Xian was unable to fill the entire fifth dimension with turbid gas. Were circling around Meanwhile, Yi Xian. Xiaoqi appeared by Yi Xian in disbelief. What do you plan to do next? This is the turbid gas of Dark World. He is not afraid of the turbid gas. Xiaoqi nodded. Yi Xian smiled. All right. Are you surprised? Yi Xian looked at the black-cloaked man. With that, he suddenly disappeared. And the latter hesitated for a moment before he said, hundreds of thousands of energy swords slashed at Bai Dizzy. Yi Xian tapped with his finger, like a storm, and a spatial ring appeared in front of the black-cloaked and Dao Vindication within the spatial ring were over 10,000 when they saw the divine crystals. If it was just the energy swords, they would not be afraid at all. Senior, Yi Xian's current strength was not enough for kill a Dao Validation Realm expert with energy swords. The black-clothed man was slightly controlling so many energy swords. Yi Xian tapped with his finger again, ordinary sword and a spatial ring appeared in front of the black-clothed man. Not to mention Dao Validation Realm experts. Fortune divine even Dao Attainment Realm experts did not dare to touch the turbid spatial rings. Once they did, I will live and die with the fifth dimension. The heavenly decay the doubting and I are absolutely irreconcilable. Bai Dizzy did not hesitate. Yi Xian, retreat. Everyone retreat immediately. I am not asking for tickets. After receiving the order, I know that there are no more. The Dao Attainment Realm experts and Dao Validation Realm experts retreated rapidly. It didn't take long for them to leave the fifth dimension. At this moment, White Robe and Zhen Wu stopped as well. Chapter 1400. When they looked at Yi Xian shook his head and smiled when he heard the black-clothed man. The reason why the doubting realm crystals were great treasures, even an expert like the black-clothed man couldn't refuse them. However, it made sense. Ordinary doubting the fortune divine crystals even the two of them did not dare to belittle the turbid gas. But they did not expect that Yi Xian was not afraid of the turbid gas. Yi Xian frowned when he thought up to this point. The turbid gas he had a few tens of millions of fortune divine crystals. He didn't just have a few tens of millions of fortune divine crystals. He even had a few super top-grade mines. A conservative estimate was that these mines produced at least 5 to 6 million fortune divine crystals every year. Since it was like that, why didn't he recruit more Dao-controlling realm experts? Even though the doubting was powerful, there would definitely be brave people who would come to the fifth dimension with great rewards. So long as the price was right, then there would definitely be people who would come to the fifth dimension. Thinking up to this point, Yi Xian immediately called Guanyin over. He thought for a moment and then said, Guanyin, write a recruitment order for me. Just say that as long as any expert at the Dao Corroboration or Dao Defense realm comes to the fifth dimension to help, Dao Corroboration realm experts will be given 10,000 fortune divine crystals for every time they help. Dao Corroboration realm experts will be given 3,000 fortune divine crystals for every time they help. Guanyin glanced at Yi Xian and nodded. All right. She turned around and left once she finished speaking. Yi Xian gazed at the black-clothed man. Senior, what's your name? The black-clothed man hesitated for a moment and said, Li Zua. Yi Xian nodded. Senior Li Zua, do you know any other formidable experts? Li Zua thought for a moment and said, I do know one or two. Yi Xian was delighted. Senior Li Zua, can you call them over? Li Zua fell silent. Yi Xian smiled. I won't force them. Li Zua shook his head. I'll give it a try. Yi Xian hurriedly cupped his fists. Thank you. As soon as he finished speaking, he turned around and left. Li Zua gazed at Yi Xian from afar, and no one knew what he was thinking. In truth, he hadn't stayed behind for the fortune divine crystal. This thing was very important to him. But it wasn't the real reason he had stayed behind. The reason why he stayed was because he wanted to form a good relationship. Others might not know this guy's background, but he did. That azure-robed man from back then was so powerful that it made people despair. It was truly hopeless. Even at his current level, he still felt hopeless every time he thought of the green-robed man. A moment later, Li Zua turned around and left. Somewhere in the starry sky, Luo Ho and the others were silent. They were present when doubting came to the fifth dimension. At this moment, Luo Ho and the others wore extremely solemn expressions. Yi Xian was not afraid of the turbid air. Moreover, he had even condensed the turbid air into a sword. This was something they had never expected. Meanwhile, Bitter King spoke abruptly. He went to the depths of the dark dimension. Luo Ho nodded. The commotion in the dark world must have something to do with him. Zhan Man's expression was cold. He must have obtained countless fortune divine crystals. Suddenly, Qing Yaoyao said, Don't worry about the fortune divine crystals. You should be wondering why he could go to the depths of the dark world and not fear the turbid gas. Zhan Man was silent. Luo Ho looked at Qing Yaoyao. What do you think? Qing Yaoyao looked down at the fifth dimension and said softly, Haven't you noticed? He can always do things that we think are impossible. Luo Ho and the others were silent. Ever since they met Yi Xian was too mysterious. Even he, Luo Ho, did not dare to enter the dark world with the turbid air. And this guy had clearly entered the depths of the dark world. Not only did he enter, but he was also not afraid of the turbid air. This guy had condensed the turbid air into a sword. This guy's body could not only absorb swords, but also the turbid air? At this moment, Qing Yaoyao suddenly said, What do you think doubting will do next? Doubting, Luo Ho said softly. They will definitely not give up. If I am not wrong, the Dao ancestor should be coming out soon. Qing Yaoyao shook her head. Not enough. A Dao ancestor cannot destroy the current fifth dimension. Luo Ho looked at Qing Yaoyao. Why? Qi Yaoyao said, Do you think Yi Xian is afraid of a Dao attainment expert? Luo Ho and the others were silent. At this moment, Qi Yaoyao said, Actually, we have two choices. The first is to wait and see, then reap the benefits. The second is to help Yi Xian. Bitter King looked at Qing Yaoyao. What about the benefits? Qing Yaoyao glanced at Bitter King. Benefits? Why do you only care about the benefits in front of you? With that, she turned and disappeared into the horizon. In the field, Luoho was silent. Help Yixian? It was not that he had not thought of it, but the risk was too great. The current situation was the most stable for the Dao burial mound. Inside the sword hall, Yixian and Nian Nian sat side by side. Grilled fish. Nian Nian stared at the golden grilled fish in front of her, her saliva almost flowing out. She spent most of her time with Yixian roasting fish. In fact, she did not know why she liked eating fish. She just liked it. Although Yixian was roasting fish, his thoughts had already drifted outside the hall. At this moment, Nian Nian suddenly said, "How can I recover my memories?" Yixian retracted his thoughts and looked at Nian Nian. "You want to recover your memories?" Nian Nian nodded and said softly, "Once I recover my memories, I can help you." Yixian was stunned, then smiled and said, "It's okay, I can still bear it." Nian Nian lowered her head slightly and did not speak. Yixian gently rubbed Nian Nian's little head. "Do you know? You've done enough for this world. You have let down the entire five-dimensional universe. You have already handed the heavy responsibility of protecting the five-dimensional universe to me. Then let me bear it." Nian Nian was about to speak when Yixian suddenly smiled and said, "Your fish is ready." Nian Nian looked at the roasted fish and sniffed it with her nose. Then, she revealed an intoxicated expression. Soon, she tore off a piece of fish and placed it in front of Yixian's mouth. Yixian laughed. He was really enjoying every moment he spent with Nian Nian. As if thinking of something, Yixian glanced at Jia Lu in the pagoda. When he saw Jia Lu, he was stunned. Gradually, the corners of his mouth curled up slightly. Jia Lu was going to succeed. If Jia Lu cultivated a Dao body, then she would definitely be able to block a Dao Attainment Realm expert. And Doubting had 2 Dao Attainment Realm experts. Thinking of this, the smile on Yixian's face gradually disappeared. For now, the five-dimensional universe still did not have a good chance of winning. It was not enough. He had to reach the Dao Attainment Realm. Thinking of this, Yixian got up and left with Nian Nian. The best way to improve was to fight. Doubting. At this time, the atmosphere in Doubting was extremely solemn. This time, almost all of Doubting's forces had attacked. However, not only did they not gain an advantage, but Yixian had also killed more than a dozen Dao Attainment Realm experts. Turbid Qi. Yixian could actually control Turbid Qi. It had to be said that this made many of Doubting's experts extremely afraid. In a large hall, basically all of Doubting's experts were gathered here. Everyone in the hall was at the Dao Attainment Realm. Leading them were Bai Dizzy, Zhenwu and White Robe. At this moment, an old man suddenly said softly, "How can he absorb the Turbid Qi? Where's the Turbid Qi?" Absorb Turbid Qi. In the hall, everyone looked at Bai Dizzy. In fact, there was still some resentment in everyone's hearts. Bai Dizzy's intelligence skills were not good enough. Bai Dizzy was silent. He did not know that Yixian could absorb Turbid Qi. Why was this guy not afraid of Turbid Qi? Bai Dizzy was puzzled no matter how he thought about it. Zhenwu suddenly said, "Bai Dizzy, aren't you going to say something?" Bai Dizzy said softly, "Every time I think I understand him, he gives me a new surprise." As he spoke, he shook his head with a bitter feeling in his heart. He had never underestimated Yixian, but Yixian would always surprise him. Just like this time, he thought that the people behind Yixian would show up, but they didn't. Yixian had used the Turbid Qi to drive them away. Even Dao Attainment Realm experts didn't dare to underestimate Turbid Qi. How could Yixian not be afraid of Turbid Qi? Meanwhile, the white-robed man spoke abruptly. "Don't forget 2 things. The first is that Mu Nian, even though she's temporarily lost her memories and strength, destroying our Dao court would be as easy as flicking her finger once she recovers her memories." Everyone was silent. Once Mu Nian regained her memories, Doubting would be finished immediately, because the five-dimensional universe no longer needed Mu Nian to suppress it. Once Mu Nian regained her memories, it would mean that her strength would reach its peak, the true peak. At that time, doubting would be like a chicken in front of her. At this moment, White Robe spoke again. The second thing is Yi Xian. Once he reaches Dao Attainment Realm, the price we have to pay to kill him will be more than 10 times higher than it is now. Everyone was silent. Once Yi Xian reached Dao Attainment Realm, it could be said that even if White Robe and Zhenwu joined forces, they might not be able to do anything to him. At this moment, Bai Dizzy suddenly said, "Wait." Everyone looked at Bai Dizzy, and Bai Dizzy said solemnly, "At most 5 days, the Tao Ancestor will come out of seclusion." Tao Ancestor. Hearing this, everyone's expression instantly relaxed. That was the true backbone of doubting. Meanwhile, a sword howl suddenly resounded from outside the hall. In the next moment, everyone raised their heads and looked over. A young man was walking slowly towards the southern gate with a sword in his hand. Yi Xian. The expressions of all the experts within the hall instantly changed when they saw Yi Xian. What's this fellow doing here? In the next moment, all the experts within the hall had appeared at the southern gate. In an instant, all of them surrounded Yi Xian. Yi Xian glanced at the doubting experts that had suddenly appeared around him, and he smiled. "So many of you?" Bai Dizzy gazed at Yi Xian and said, "What? You intend to fight all of us by yourself?" Yi Xian opened his palm. In the next moment, countless energy swords condensed from death energy appeared around him. All the experts of doubting retreated explosively when they witnessed this scene. The expressions of Bai Dizzy and the others instantly became solemn. Yi Xian smiled and said, "Don't run. I've come here this time to ask for a favor from all of you." Bai Dizzy frowned slightly and said, "Ask for our help? Are you sure?" Yi Xian nodded. "I've been at the Dao Control Realm for too long, and I want to break through. I want all of you to help me." Bai Dizzy gazed at Yi Xian and said, "Have you gone mad?" Yi Xian gazed at Zhenwu and said, "Zhenwu, I've never fought you in the past. Now let's fight again." Zhenwu gazed at Yi Xian and said, "You want to fight me, and then charge into the Dao Control Realm?" Yi Xian nodded and said, "I won't utilize foul energy." Zhenwu stared fixedly at Yi Xian and said, "Do you think I'll agree?" Yi Xian pointed at the white-robed figures and said, "Both of you attack me together." Attack him together. Everyone in the surroundings was stunned. Chapter 1401. Together. No one expected Yi Xian to challenge Zhenwu and White Robe. 1 against 2. Was Yi Xian crazy? Although Yi Xian was a genius, Zhenwu and the white-robed man could be said to be the strongest people in the Dao court who had achieved the Dao. And now he wanted to fight 1 against 2. Zhenwu looked at Yi Xian without saying a word. Beside him, White Robe kept silent with his eyes closed. Yi Xian smiled. "Why are you refusing?" Zhenwu looked at Yi Xian in silence. At this moment, Bai Dizzy's voice suddenly sounded in Zhenwu's mind. "This person must have something to rely on," Zhenwu said in a low voice. "But this is also our chance. A chance to kill him. Isn't that right?" Bai Dizzy was silent. If Zhenwu and White Robe joined forces, they would have a chance to kill Yi Xian. But if they couldn't kill him, it was very likely that Yi Xian would reach Dao defense. At this moment, White Robe suddenly opened his eyes. "Why think so much? Let's just fight." As his voice fell, he suddenly rushed forward. The next moment, a silver light appeared half an inch between Yi Xian's eyebrows. The reason why it didn't pierce through was because a sword had pierced the body of that spear. Seeing that his attack had missed, White Robe suddenly swept his spear horizontally. Swoosh! With a sweep, space was torn apart. Yi Xian blocked it with his sword. Boom! Under the spear, Yi Xian instantly retreated hundreds of feet away. But just as he stopped, a silver spear pierced through the air. Yi Xian straightened his sword and slashed forward. Boom! A wave of sword light exploded in the field. Yi Xian retreated hundreds of feet again. Before he stopped, a shadow suddenly appeared in front of him. Then a silver spear instantly reached his throat. As fast as lightning, Yi Xian's expression was calm. Just as the spear was about to pierce his throat, his body suddenly leaned back, and at the same time, the sword in his hand suddenly flew out. Chi! The sword brought with it a sword light that looked like a crescent moon. White Robe suddenly withdrew his spear and slammed it down. Boom! Yi Xian's sword was directly hit, and the powerful force sent the sword flying. Yi Xian himself took the opportunity to retreat 1,000 feet away. The moment he stopped, he stretched out his right hand, and the sword that was sent flying by the White Robe landed firmly in his palm. In the distance, the white-robed man stood with a spear in his hand. He was dressed in white robes and had a silver spear in his hand. He looked like a god of war. Zhen Wu did not intervene. Whether it was him or White Robe, both of them had their own pride. As long as Yi Xian didn't play any dirty tricks, they wouldn't choose to gang up on Yi Xian. Arrogance. They had fought countless battles in their lives, so why would they fear Yi Xian? At this moment, White Robe suddenly took a step forward. With each step, he struck with his spear. The space in front of Yi Xian suddenly cracked open. Following that, a silver light flashed out. The spear arrived before the man. Yi Xian did not block it. Instead, he stabbed with his sword. This time he chose to fight head-on. Boom! The sword light shattered, and Yi Xian retreated more than 10 feet. However, White Robe also retreated more than 300 feet with his spear. Yi Xian actually gained the upper hand in this head-on confrontation. Not far away, Bai Dizzy frowned slightly. How is this possible? At this moment, Zhen Wu suddenly said, his strength is different from before. Strength. Yi Xian's current strength was naturally different from before. He had absorbed the blood of the entire Naga Dragon clan. He now possessed the strength of the Naga Dragon clan. In terms of pure strength, perhaps only Jia Lu could compete with him. At this moment, Bai Dizzy's voice suddenly sounded in Zhen Wu's mind. When he fights with White Robe later, if you ambush him, how confident are you of killing him? Hearing this, Zhen Wu frowned slightly. He looked at Bai Dizzy. What do you mean? Bai Dizzy's face was extremely gloomy. Zhen Wu, I know you have your pride, but you have to know that this Yi Xian. Zhen Wu suddenly shook his head. Bai Dizzy, I know that in your heart, you have always wanted Yi Xian to die. I also want him to die. However, I will not ambush him. Now it is a fair battle between him and White Robe. Bai Dizzy stared at Zhen Wu. Zhen Wu, don't be pedantic. I beg you. Zhen Wu looked at Yi Xian in the distance and said softly, it's not pedantic. It's the bottom line. Bai Dizzy still wanted to say something. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly rushed towards White Robe with his sword in hand. Bai Dizzy's face was extremely ugly. If Zhen Wu suddenly ambushed him, he had a high chance of killing Yi Xian. However, Zhen Wu was too pedantic. Bottom line? Bai Dizzy also wanted to have a bottom line. However, between the bottom line and Doubting's life and death, he chose the latter. As if he had thought of something, he suddenly looked at a Sir God on his right. At this moment, Zhen Wu's voice suddenly rang in his head. Bai Dizzy, I Doubting, am I a sore loser? Bai Dizzy looked at Zhen Wu. Zhen Wu said softly, even if we lose, let us lose with some dignity, okay? Bai Dizzy was silent. Zhen Wu said again, let them fight. If White Robe loses, I won't say anything if you choose to gang up on him. But now let them fight fairly. I believe that White Robe will choose the same. Bai Dizzy was still silent. Zhen Wu looked at Bai Dizzy. Doubting is my belief. I will fight for this belief until the end. I know that doubting is your belief too. However, we cannot throw away our bottom line for our belief. Bai Dizzy sighed softly. Zhen Wu did not say anything else. He looked into the distance. At this moment, Yi Xian and White Robe's battle was very intense. Actually, he was feeling rather emotional. Back when Yi Xian had just gone to Celestial Abyss, Yi Xian was not his match. But now, Yi Xian's strength was no weaker than his and White Robe's. Yi Xian's growth was really too fast. Boom! At this moment, an explosion suddenly sounded. Under everyone's gaze, White Robe was forced back nearly 100 feet by Yi Xian's sword. White Robe had just stopped when he suddenly soared into the sky. The next moment, he held the silver spear in his hand and threw it at Yi Xian. The spear was like a raging dragon emerging from the sea, piercing through heaven and earth. Below, Yi Xian's expression was calm. Before the spear reached him, the space around him was already distorted. The momentum of the spear was too strong. When the spear arrived above Yi Xian suddenly transformed into a ray of light that shot into the sky. Bang! A world-shaking explosion suddenly resounded, and then the space in an area of over 100 kilometers cracked apart. In midair, Yi Xian held his sword firmly against the spear. The energy within the spear hadn't vanished completely. The glow on Yi Xian's sword was growing dimmer and dimmer. Right at this moment, White Robe suddenly appeared in the sky above the spear, and then he stomped his right foot against the tip of the spear. Bang! Yi Xian descended straight down from midair, while the tip of the spear was constantly pressing against the tip of Yi Xian's sword. So White Robe's energy was ceaselessly suppressing Yi Xian. Right at this moment, Yi Xian suddenly stomped his right foot against the ground. In the next moment, the sword domain suddenly appeared here. At the same time, he swiftly slashed his sword forward. Bang! Yi Xian stopped. In the next moment, White Robe retreated explosively by 300 m. After White Robe stopped, he gazed at Yi Xian with eyes that were filled with battle intent. Fight! Yi Xian's eyes were filled with battle intent as well. Since he'd absorbed the dragon's blood and cultivated his body into the Dao body, he'd rarely fought. But now he wanted to fight to his heart's content. Yi Xian walked towards White Robe with his sword in hand. His blood started to surge within him. However, he didn't release the energy of his bloodline. Not only did he not release the energy of his bloodline, he didn't even expose his Dao body. White Robe gazed at Yi Xian from afar, while he held the silver spear tightly in his right hand. The silver spear in his hand started to tremble violently, and a monstrous aura enveloped the surroundings. The aura of the spear was overwhelming. Right at this moment, Yi Xian suddenly vanished on the spot. White Robe's face was expressionless, as he suddenly stabbed the spear in his right hand forward. Bang! A ray of sword light was forced to stop by this spear strike. The space around White Robe and Yi Xian transformed into nothingness at this moment, whereas White Robe and Yi Xian separated from each other at this moment, and both of them retreated explosively by over 1 kilometer. As Yi Xian was flying backwards, a flying sword suddenly slashed towards White Robe. White Robe stabbed forward in midair. Bang! The flying sword was blocked. However, in the next moment, Yi Xian suddenly appeared in front of the flying sword. He grabbed the sword and slashed forward with great force. When this strike descended, the expressions of everyone here changed drastically, including White Robe. Dao sword. This strike wasn't an ordinary sword technique any longer, but a Dao sword. It was also the first time Yi Xian had executed a Dao sword since he'd cultivated the Dao sword. This strike shook the heavens and the earth. White Robe's eyes revealed a solemn expression for the first time, as he stood before Yi Xian. He held the spear with both hands and swiftly swept it horizontally, causing a strand of domineering spear energy to sweep out. But in the next moment, this spear energy was directly slashed into pieces by Yi Xian's strike. Bang! Under the gazes of everyone, White Robe instantly retreated explosively by 3 kilometers, whereas the space in an area of 3 kilometers in front of Yi Xian had been transformed into nothingness. This strike had forcefully obliterated this expanse of space. Nearby, a wisp of blood slowly seeped out from the corner of White Robe's mouth. Moreover, countless cracks had appeared on the silver spear in his hand. The surroundings suddenly fell silent. White Robe was at a complete disadvantage in this collision. In the distance, Yi Xian walked slowly towards White Robe with his sword in hand. Meanwhile, a trace of viciousness flashed through White Robe's eyes, and then he suddenly leaped up. At this moment, his entire body became illusory, and the silver spear in his hand suddenly trembled violently. At a disadvantage, Yi Xian suddenly leaped up and slashed with his sword. Dao sword. With this slash, the space around Yi Xian instantly became illusory. Meanwhile, White Robe suddenly stabbed down with his spear. It was a tit for tat. Both of them had executed their strongest attacks. Bang! As soon as the spear and sword came into contact, the space in an area of over 100 kilometers around the southern gate was forcefully obliterated. On the other hand, Yi Xian and White Robe retreated explosively, and they retreated for over 10 kilometers. As soon as Yi Xian stopped, the space in an area of 3 kilometers behind him was instantly transformed into nothingness. Yi Xian was first stunned, and then he hurriedly fell to the ground. He held his chest with both hands, as if he was about to die. Actually, he was completely fine because his body had forcefully withstood all the force of White Robe's attack. However, he didn't want to expose his Dao physique. In the distance, White Robe was quite heavily injured as well. However, he didn't fall, and he stood there with his spear in hand. Meanwhile, White Robe suddenly charged towards Yi Xian with his spear in hand. Obviously, he wanted to put an end to Yi Xian right away. Now that Yi Xian was heavily injured, it was the best time to kill him. Under everyone's gazes, Yi Xian clutched his chest as blood flowed incessantly from his mouth, and he seemed to be on the verge of death. White Robe was getting closer and closer to Yi Xian. Chapter 1402. Just as White Robe was several feet away from Yi Xian, White Robe suddenly stopped. White Robe stared at Yi Xian. "Stop pretending." Yi Xian did not react, and still looked like he was about to die. White Robe just stared at Yi Xian. He did not choose to attack again. After a moment, seeing that White Robe did not attack, Yi Xian sat up. He looked at White Robe and thought it was a pity. This guy actually did not fall for it. White Robe looked at Yi Xian. "If you were really that weak, you would not have come to challenge me." Saying that, he slowly closed his eyes. "Yi Xian, if you want to kill me, there is only one way, and that is to kill me openly." "You want to kill me? Then you might be thinking too much." Yi Xian chuckled. "Then I will kill you openly." As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly leaped up with his sword in hand, and then he swiftly slashed down. Dao sword. At the same time that the sword slashed down, a mysterious force suddenly enveloped White Robe. Sword domain. White Robe was expressionless as he stabbed out with his spear. Boom! Heaven and earth trembled. Under everyone's gaze, White Robe retreated rapidly. Not far away, Bai Dizzy and the others did not look good. Because Yi Xian could already suppress White Robe. He did not rely on battle techniques, but purely on strength and that Dao sword. If it were anyone else, they would definitely not be able to continuously use such a powerful sword technique. But Yi Xian could, because his fleshly body was really strong enough. The battle became more and more intense, and the blood in Yi Xian's body gradually boiled. However, he was still suppressing his bloodline power. This bloodline power was too abnormal. Unless it was a desperate situation, he would usually not use it. In the distance, Bai Dizzy suddenly looked at Jinwu. "He is getting stronger as he fights." Jinwu was silent. He also realized this problem. Yi Xian was getting stronger as he fought. In other words, Yi Xian had just broken through. Right now, Yi Xian was using battle to stimulate his potential. Bai Dizzy said softly, "If this continues, I don't know if White Robe will lose, but I do know that this Yi Xian will become stronger and stronger. He might even reach the Dao manipulation realm." Obviously, he still wanted Jinwu to sneak up on Yi Xian. Now that Yi Xian was being forced by the white-robed man, as long as Jinwu chose to launch a sneak attack, there was a great chance that he could kill Yi Xian. In the field, only Jinwu had a good chance to kill Yi Xian. Jinwu fell silent. Bai Dizzy sighed softly. "Jinwu, I know you're proud, but have you ever thought that once this person reaches the Imperial Dao, even a Dao ancestor wouldn't be able to kill him so easily? You have to know that he has yet to unleash his full strength. Putting everything else aside, he has yet to use the power of his bloodline. What does this mean?" Seeing Yi Ling's appearance, Yi Xian felt as though his heart was being sliced by a knife. He clenched his fists, and his entire body trembled. When Yi Ling saw Yi Xian, her tears flowed out. "Brother, it hurts, it hurts." Hearing this, Yi Xian's expression turned savage. In the next instant, he charged in front of Zhang Mu and kicked Zhang Mu's head. Peng! Qingqing Yi Clan Ancestral Hall. Ancestors, Yi Xian has no talent, no virtue. From now on, Yi Xian's position as prince shall be replaced by Yi Lang. The one who spoke was an old man in black robes. Not far behind the old man, there was a youth with a faint smile on his face. This person was Yi Lang. On both sides were the Yi clan's elders. Why? At this time, a timid voice rang out in the ancestral hall. Everyone turned to look, and saw a little girl standing at the door. She was about 12 or 13 years old, and her hands were tightly gripping the hem of her skirt. Her face had a sickly pallor, and she looked a little weak. There was even a trace of fear in her eyes. This girl was called Yi Ling, and she was Yi Xian's younger sister. When she heard that the clan wanted to remove Yi Xian, she disregarded her illness and rushed over. The black-robed old man frowned. Yi Ling, what are you doing? The little girl called Yi Ling bowed to the people in the ancestral hall, and said timidly, Great Elder, my brother Yi Xian is a prince. Why did you discard him for no reason? The Great Elder looked at Yi Ling coldly. This is a matter of the clan. Why are you interrupting? Leave. Yi Ling was clearly a little fearful. She did not dare to look the Great Elder in the eye, but she did not leave. Instead, she mustered up her courage and walked into the ancestral hall. She bowed to the elders on both sides of the hall and said, Elders, my brother is currently fighting with the Li family for the mining rights of the mine in Nanshan. He is now fighting for the family, and it is unknown whether he is alive or dead. However, the family has used a groundless excuse to remove his position as the crown prince. Impudent. The Great Elder suddenly raged. Discard him or not, it's not up to a little girl like you to decide. Men drag her away. At this time, the new prince Yi Lang suddenly laughed. You should be flogged 30 times as a warning to others. The Great Elder replied coldly. Then flog her 30 times. Soon 2 guards of the Yi clan rushed in. Yi Ling clenched her fists and said angrily, This is unfair. My brother has risked his life for the clan for so many years. Even now, he is risking his life for the clan. The clan is so unfair to him. One of the guards glanced at the new prince Yi Lang. He knew that this was his chance to shine. The guard sneered. Young Master Yi Lang inherits the position of prince. What are you yelling about? As he spoke, he raised his hand and slapped Yi Ling's face. Slap. A crisp slap sounded, and the right side of Yi Ling's face instantly swelled up. However, she did not cry. She only held her cheek tightly. Yi Lang looked at the guard and smiled. What's your name? The guard hurriedly bowed. Subordinate Zhang Mu greets the prince. Yi Lang nodded. You're not bad. After I become the prince, I will need 10 guards. You can be my guard from now on. Hearing this, Zhang Mu was overjoyed. He hurriedly bowed deeply. This subordinate is willing to go through fire and water for the prince. Yi Lang nodded. Drag him away. This person is disturbing the ancestral hall. Don't hold back. Understood? Zhang Mu glanced at Yi Lang. When he saw the murderous intent in Yi Lang's eyes, he understood. He immediately grabbed Yi Ling's hair and dragged her out. At this moment, Zhang Mu seemed to see something and suddenly stopped. In the ancestral hall, everyone turned their heads to look outside. Not far from the ancestral hall, a young man was walking towards the ancestral hall. The young man was wearing a tight-fitting robe. The robe was tattered and covered in blood. The young man was Yi Xian, who had rushed back from Nanshan. Seeing Yi Xian, Yi Lang's lips curled into a sinister smile. Inside the ancestral hall, the elders frowned. The Great Elder narrowed his eyes, his face dark and gloomy. No one knew what he was thinking. From afar, when Yi Xian saw Zhang Mu dragging Yi Ling, his face turned savage. Who gave you the guts to touch my sister? When Zhang Mu saw Yi Xian, his face changed. He hurriedly looked at Yi Lang, and was about to speak. At this time, Yi Xian was like a ferocious tiger leaping in front of him. Before the latter could react, Yi Xian's fist landed on his face. Pung! Zhang Mu felt a wave of dizziness, and he stumbled and fell. However, Yi Ling did not stop there. He charged towards Zhang Mu again. At this time, Yi Lang suddenly roared. Yi Xian, he's my man. How dare you? Yi Xian suddenly stepped on Zhang Mu's chest. Pooh! Zhang Mu spat out a mouthful of blood. Seeing this, Yi Lang's face turned ugly. Yi Xian looked up at him and snarled. Your man. As he spoke, he stepped on Zhang Mu's face. Zhang Mu's face turned into a bloody mess as he screamed. Prince, save me. Yi Xian did not care about Zhang Mu, as he walked to Yi Ling's side. Seeing Yi Ling's state, Yi Xian felt as though his heart was being cut by a knife. He clenched his fists and his entire body trembled. When Yiling saw Yi Xian, her tears flowed. "Brother, it hurts, it hurts." Hearing this, Yi Xian's expression turned savage. In the next instant, he charged in front of Zhang Mu and kicked Zhang Mu's head. "Peng, you're tuning in to the Li Mei's Sword of Destiny YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.